Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. So on behalf of our Acting Executive Director, Mr. Adrian Jau, I would like to welcome you all to this consultative engagement. As you might all be aware, today we are here to discuss the key issues that are pertinent to the services sector, particularly the professional services, communication, ICT, tourism, transport services, distribution services, environmental services, construction services, education, recreational. These are very important services and are critical to our economy in EAC. So I just would like to urge all of you to use this platform, first of all, to identify and address key challenges and opportunities that these sectors have for us as a private sector, but also to develop and prioritize some key policy agenda that we should pursue in terms of services in our region. Also, most importantly, to establish sustainable frameworks for policy dialogues, particularly in your country, but also at the regional level, so that we can further support policy reform. And maybe last but not least, which is also very important, we urge you to be members of a platform that we are currently building for services in our region, and it's going to be positioned at EABC. And I would like to urge each and everyone to really participate and actively engage in this discussion so that overall we can have a very thriving services sector in our region. So once again, let me take the opportunity to welcome you and wish you a very wonderful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you so much for setting the tone for today's workshop. And as you said, we really look forward to the contributions of members from Republic of South Sudan as we shape advocacy and trading services through the forthcoming policy agenda in trading services that will be developed by our consultants. So please remain engaged for the rest of the day and ensure that we contribute effectively. We really want to build on your ideas, and that's why we're doing this consultative meeting, so that whatever we are doing, we're able to represent you effectively as an apex body of the private sector in the region. So at this point, if we have all introduced ourselves, allow me to introduce Agatha Neritu, who is going to take us through the workshop details today. And let's give our open ears and our contributions as well. So Karib Sana, Agatha, take us through the training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. And once again, good morning to everybody. As the team has said, we are having a consultative workshop for the Republic of South Sudan. We've had a chance to go to all the other, well, not all the other partner states. So we've had a chance to go to Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, and Uganda. And we are now doing virtual consultations in South Sudan, DRC, and Somalia. So DRC will be on Thursday. I have heard there is a representative from DRC. And then we will have Somalia tomorrow. Not to say that you can only attend the one that is focused on your country. We welcome everybody. So maybe one of the things I will do is talk about the objectives, because actually, Jeff, you are coming before me in the new program. But let me talk about the objectives of the workshop. And then we can have the presentation on EABC before I dig down into the broader presentation. So what we are trying to do, and I believe Frank has talked a little bit about it, is to support EABC to have a more structured engagement where trading services is concerned. So what we hope to do during this workshop is to engage with service sector stakeholders across the various service sectors. As you know, we have about 12 service sectors. So we want to identify what are some of the key challenges, what are some of the key opportunities, And what would you like EABC to advocate on? What are some of your key pain points? But from the perspective of trade in services across the region. So I know at national level we do have a lot of services, but what's the focus on trade in services? Where trading across the EAC is concerned. Then we want to develop something that EABC can then run with that is specific, is measurable, is achievable, as well as time bound. So we've already agreed, or we have proposed to have a 5-year agenda through which they identify key issues that they will include in their annual budgets. And then we want to support them to come up with an institutional framework that can support sustained dialogue. So there has been a bit of dialogue, but it has been more ad hoc than sustained. We don't have same mechanisms that are dedicated to public-private dialogue on services. Perhaps we do through the national committees on trade in services, but private sector is not actively engaged in these committees or actively aware. So these are some of the things that we want to do. So our two main objectives is to support EABC in coming up with this regional trade in services policy advocacy agenda, and then also propose a mechanism. And that's what I am going to do during the course of today. And we are hoping that we will finish or we will be able to address this during the day. Now, I see, Frank, you have your hand up. I'm assuming the chair has arrived.
Yes. Yes, he
Okay,
has
let
joined us.
me stop sharing so that we can listen to the chair. Thank you.
Hello, good
Thank you,
morning.
Agatha. Good morning, Chair.
How are you? How is everybody there?
We are all
Fine,
fine,
thank
and we are
you.
very honored to have you.
Okay, thank you. Is it my time to open the session?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to put on the video or is okay?
It will be okay if we see you, but if there are any technical issues, it's okay. You can just continue.
Okay. Thank you, the staff of EABC. Today, it's a very good opportunity for South Sudan. And I want to welcome the honorable ministers, senior government officials from the EAC, partners, states, representative of the EABC Community Secretariat, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to welcome you all to this critical consultative meeting. Thank you for joining us today on the behalf of the East Africa Business Council, whether from the government, the private sector, or our development partners. We are present here to demonstrate the shared commitment to advance our region's integration. Arubani Sana, I welcome you all to this forum. East Africa Business Council, East Africa is service sector is imagined as a powerhouse of growth and opportunity. Due to effort and reforms, trade services across the EAC has grown steeply in recent years. Since the EABC Common Market Protocol came into force in 2010, we have witnessed the significant progress. The effort of services in the region grew by almost 50%. from 2011 to 2019 or more of the GDP or more of the GDP in many partner states. This includes vital industry such as finance, information, and communication technology, transport, education, tourism, and professional services. This sector generates income and jobs and support trade in goods by providing essential logistics, finance, and communication links. We have many success stories to celebrate. Under the Common Market Protocol, partner states committed to liberalizing 136 subsectors in 7 priorities: services, industry, business services, communication and financial services, transport, and tourism. This commitment has inspired reforms and opened new markets for East Africa service providers. I'm delighted the Republic of South Sudan is now part of our EAC family, expanding our regional market and potential. South Sudan participation offered a new opportunity to extend the services from banking to education and ICT, to growing a population eager to connect with region. We welcome our South Sudan brothers and sisters to this integration initiative. Their inclusions remind us that our communities' integration must be inclusive and leave no member behind. Our 7 partner states, now including the DRC, present over 300 million people, significant market as a talent base. We need to enhance this potential. Ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate this opportunity, we must also candidly address the challenges and barriers in hindering trade in services in the EAC. Our goal of our integrated services market is within reach. However, several obstacles still stand in the way of services providers operating across East Africa, including regulatory and constraints, infrastructure gaps, lack of harmonization of policies, and capacity and information gaps. Addressing this challenge is a huge task. I am delighted we are here to identify solutions and chart a course to remove these obstacles so that the East Africa services sector can reach its full potential. Now is the time for action. I call upon all the stakeholders here today to actively participate and contribute to shaping sustainable policy solution for our region's service sector. Each of us has a role to play. I encourage the private sector leaders to form a unified front and where possible, speak as a coalition by industry or country so that our advocacy sends a clear and consistent message on what is needed. I urge the government and EAC officials to take our recommendation into the upcoming policies forums, council meetings, and legislative processes, and championing the removal of the bottlenecks we have identified. I call upon the civil society and academia to help ensure that the services and the trade benefits communities. create decent job, and uphold a quality standard. Last but not least, we appreciate our development partners for their support. We count on your continuous partnership to implement reform. In conclusion, today's consultative meeting is a working session to generate actionable solutions. I encourage everyone to engage openly and constructively. We aim to develop a clear set of priorities and recommendations for strengthen the services sector. Finally, I urge you to do your part together. Let us drive East Africa service sector to renew, hide, and build the integrated prosperous East Africa we are envisioning. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I look forward to fruitful discussion and successful outcome of this meeting. Let us set the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair, for those good welcome remarks and opening this workshop. We really welcome you and thank you for making time.
You're welcome.
I am trying to join to connect to make a presentation about EABC. You can just give me a few seconds.
Jeremy's scared. It's all right. Entra con tu clase ya.
Geoffrey?
Geoffrey, I have a copy of your presentation. Do you want me to beam it? Geoffrey?
Yes, Agatha.
EABC.
Can you hear me?
Yes. May I beam your presentation?
Hello, yes, I'm from DRC, but
Yeah, in Kinshasa, it is raining too much, so I cannot hear you properly. I'm from DRC, Isabel Monga.
Geoffrey, may I beam your presentation? Oh, he has beamed it. Okay, proceed.
Are you able to
please.
see my presentation?
We can
Yes, we are
see
able.
it, although it's not in presentation mode.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone, once again. Are you able to hear me?
We
Can
can
you
hear
me?
you, Jeff.
Okay. So apologies for that issues of network connection. Quickly, I will do a very brief 10 minutes overview of who we are. The East African Business Council is our regional apex body for the private sector associations and corporates in East Africa. And our main purpose, of course, is to ensure that we drive the East African integration process through trade and investment. We are over 25 years now, established in 1997, and we're here to foster the interests of the private sector in the East integration process. We are driven by our vision of a borderless borderless Africa for business and investment. And our mission is to advocate for a conducive business environment and promote sustainable private sector driven growth in our East region. I always say, may God help us to see a borderless East Africa. So what do? We do evidence-based policy advocacy. Provide advisory services, we analyze markets and provide market intelligence on regulatory developments in our region. We represent the ESC private sector in policy formulation at ministerial all the way to the summit level. We address members' concerns. Those include non-tariff barriers, trade and business restrictions, that are inconsistent with the ESC treaty and commitments. We do high-level public-private dialogues, and these help us to not only address our issues to the policy level, but also we engage our partners or stakeholders in the government to through the PPDs to highlight the restrictions that are and issues that members are facing, after which then form our policy agenda. Of course, we also promote business networking for our members so that they know what they are doing, each other are doing, so that they really foster synergies. We're driven by 4 strategic pillars. One is membership obsession. When I say membership obsession, is that really we want to significantly enhance our value to our members in terms of representing their interests, but also creating value that makes them really feel attracted to our membership. So our core other pillar is policy advocacy. We promote evidence-based advocacy for increased intra and extra ESC businesses. And for this one, we do it through our policy agenda. We already have an annual agenda, But here we want to really specifically for this consultative workshop to develop a specific one for trading services. We have seen it's a bit easy to advocate. I mean, say easy quote unquote for movement of goods, because you can see that the truck is stuck on the border or something else. But for services, it has been kind of staggered in terms of how we advance our advocacy, and that is why we want to do a specific policy advocacy agenda for trading services. So this is just adding on this pillar, much as we have another one that talks about our general advocacy, but we want to have a specific one on policy advocacy on trading services. So this is also adding on that pillar, strengthening the pillar of advocacy action. We also want to strengthen the governance and institutional capacity to be able to deliver our mandate, and therefore governance and operational excellence is one of the pillars that we really go with. Also, the fourth one is ensuring sustainability. And here we want this pillar is basically on ensuring that we increase our sustainability. Of course, as you know, we are a member-based organization. Therefore, we depend on our collections, on subscriptions for you, our members, that you will graciously give us on an annual basis for us to be able to run the day-to-day activities of the Secretariat. So those are the four pillars: membership, advocacy, strengthen governance, as well as ensuring our financial sustainability. So in terms of how we are structured, we have the annual general meeting, AGM, which is the highest decision-making organ of the Secretariat of the EABC. And the AGM meets once a year to elect the executive committee. And allow me pause and request to give a round of applause to our new chairman from the Republic of South Sudan, who has joined this year as our new chairman. If you can be able to clap or send a thumbs up emoji, I'll appreciate it. If you can open your mic and give a welcome and a congratulatory clap to our chair. Thank you. Hoping that you've done that. So then we have our executive committee board. It's headed by the chairperson. As I said, who's elected on an annual rotational basis, and vice chairs from each of the partner states, apart from the one that is providing the chairperson, meaning that the Republic of South Sudan cannot provide the vice chair because they have the sitting chairperson. But the rest of the other countries provide vice chairs. We have board subcommittees, one on finance and administration, policy and advocacy, resource mobilization, and a newly created one on climate change and basically on climate change. On the secretariat, then we have a secretariat under the board. It sits in Arusha, Tanzania, and it's headed by the CEO. Currently, we have an acting chair CEO, Mr. Adrian Jau, would have wanted to be here, but it's also another engagement. So that he chairs, he's our chief executive officer. And the secretariat manages the day-to-day activities of the EABC. So we have sectoral specific desks and platforms through which we do our work. We have one in trading services where I lead on. I have one on manufacturing and agriculture, infrastructure and energy, as well as youth and women in business platform. So this is how we are structured in terms of how we work. Is how we do advocacy through. So in terms of how we are formed, we operate through national focal points, meaning each partner state has an umbrella body of the private sector. That umbrella body is what we call the national focal point, and therefore they represent us at the national level. In Burundi, we have the Chamber of the Federal Chamber of Commerce, Industry, and Agriculture. In Kenya, we have KEPSA. Rwanda, you have PSF. Uganda have PSFU, and we our very own South Sudan Chamber of Commerce, Industrial and Agriculture represents us in South Sudan. And Tanzania, we are presented by TPSF. I currently have changed to Tanzania Private Sector Federation, no longer Foundation. But they shall change because it's been changed newly. And then in DRC, we are represented by Federal Chamber of Entrepreneurs in DRC. And in Somalia, we are represented by the Somali Chamber of Commerce. Sorry. I have a hanging laptop. So what are our priority advocacy issues? We're normally on two areas. One, we want to see the implementation, an effective implementation and successful implementation of the EAC Customs Union Protocol, as well as a successful implementation of the Common Market Protocol. On Customs Union, our major day-to-day work, we want to see that the EAC CET is functioning, it is followed and it's operational. And currently we actually pushed for adoption of the fourth band of the 3.5% of goods that are coming from outside our region to ensure that we promote industrialization. But however, we keep seeing the stages of application, and therefore that's where we one of our sectoral desks is on a daily today, ensuring that the CET that Manchester has passed and adopted, the partner states are adhering to it. We always want to see the abolition of charges of equivalent effects, discriminative levies, charges on ESC goods. So this really what we do, we usually do frequent border visits to ensure that we inspect our borders to see that if there are any issues that are introduced at our borders, then we advocate. So this is something that we do on a daily, and my colleague Frank Dafa is always on top of this. On elimination of non-tariff barriers and having legally binding mechanism on NTBs, it's part of our daily work. Of course, as you know, NTBs are a challenge. You address one, the two are introduced. So we're always on top of this, urging our stakeholders, the policymakers, the trade facilitation agencies at the borders, as well as our trade corridors to ensure that these NTBs are seen, identified, reported, and therefore we followed up. So my colleague Dafa is also always on top of this, to ensuring that the NTBs are reported and addressed where possible. We push for the establishment of trade dispute settlement mechanism through operationalizing the Trade Remedies Committee. These are negotiations that are still ongoing. We have not seen this committee work. As you may know, it is a committee that is supposed to address disputes, most of which emanate from these NTBs. But because of since this has not been established at the regional level, that's why NTBs are there. So there's no mechanism for resolving these conflicts and instilling punitive measures. So here we always, push the partner states to ensure that this committee is established, and so an ongoing advocacy process. In terms of the common market implementation, and this is where really the services fall into, we want to see the liberalization of trading services, especially for the 7 agreed sectors. And this, of course, my colleague Agatha will talk about them. I will not bother to preempt what she's going to say, but these are the 7 sectors that were liberalized by partner states that they unilaterally agreed to liberalize. But of course, we keep seeing low open up in terms of removal restrictions and honoring the commitments the partner states have agreed to liberalize. So, and this is why really majorly we want to establish this trade and services policy agenda so that we keep monitoring, as Agatha said, it's a smart advocacy, specific, measurable, and we are able to follow what partner states have committed. We also see we keep pushing on liberalization of air transport services. As you know, if most of you are traveling, how expensive to travel across a region is. This is why partner states have not adopted our regional skies as domestic, and therefore we see a lot of charges, a lot of levies, a lot of unfair, really unregulatory framework that does not promote the openness of our sky, and therefore makes our tickets very expensive. In fact, we have done almost 2 studies, very comprehensive studies, and submitted to the EAC Secretariat, showing the pain points. And you really, when you look at the speak to the travel agencies, the cost of a ticket is almost between 20 to 25%, and the rest of the 75% is really constituted by taxes, the landing fares, the navigation charges, etc., the cost on fuel. So these the taxes on fuel. So when you add up all these charges, you really those are charges that make the cost of traveling from, say, from Kigali to Nairobi to going up to $600 or $700. So that's really something that we keep pushing. But as I said, advocacy is a process, and advocacy for trading services now is then actually harder than any other. We keep pushing for free movement of workers. That is we call for harmonization of work permit regimes. Some of our partner states still charge work permits for East Africans to work in their respective countries, and this is not fair because it does not provide for what the treaty gives entails. So we keep pushing for this, and we hope this will be relaxed through the policy agenda that we're about to develop and monitor. We keep pushing for the harmonization of domestic taxes and abolition of discriminative taxes, especially on the excise duty, VAT, as well as income tax. Of course, it's an ongoing process. As we know, all of our countries have different VAT. For example, if you go VAT rates, and we really want to ensure that we have a harmony in having a harmonized VAT, specifically because this will mostly what affects trading across our borders, and therefore increase the cost on doing business. We also push for lowering the cost of doing business through the telecommunications, and we appeal to all partners to join the One Network area. And let me pause to give kudos to the Republic of Tanzania, as well as Burundi, that joined in May last year, the One Network area. And so we hope that other partner states can join, especially DRC and Somalia that recently joined us. So because if the communication, the cost on communication is high, meaning communication is expensive, transfer of money is expensive, so that really increases cost on doing business. Key achievements, the Taveta holidays were one of the other ad hoc border visits that we do, where whenever there's an issue, but also celebrate what our partner states have achieved. And there, I think we're trying to celebrate in Uganda, where a key value chain on transport was a boost, and therefore they are able to introduce new buses. So this is our engagement with our stakeholders and partner states in terms of celebrating what our advocacy has done. Key achievements, maybe to mention quickly, in terms of pushing for partner states to join the One Network area and bring down the cost on communications. We're happy to say that in May, we saw the joining of Burundi and Tanzania to join the One Network area, and now you can actually call from Tanzania, call Burundi, call Uganda at a domestic rate tariff. So that's a plus. We kept pushing for this, and they were happy join the network area. And therefore, that's of course a plus to all of us if we are trading across our borders. In terms of NTBs, and this is like quite a number of them, I just highlighted a few. We have a policy agenda that has most of this that you can probably see, but I remember last year there was an imposition of the ECTN of around $350 per container that was destined to the Republic of South Sudan. But we advocated, and we are happy to report that this has been waived. And say this was really contributed to around 12.5% of the metric ton of the and clearing delays at Mombasa port. So this was really making trading with the RSS quite expensive, especially for cargo owners. But happy to report that the ECTN charges were waived. In harmonizing customs taxes, we advocated, as I said, for the adoption of the 3.5% fourth band for ESC common external tariff, and I've seen this really helping our nascent industry to grow and ensure that industrialization is thriving in our region. So we would say that that is it is a plus. In terms of standards, we advocated for harmonization of standards for packaging, especially for sweeteners. And maybe my colleague Dafa would add to this, but we saw we had issues where partner states were not allowing there was no harmony on the standards, especially for packaging of sweeteners, and as well as the level of pH in drinking water, where they say, I think the water coming from RSS has high pH, therefore we can't allow it in Rwanda. So we advocated for that harmonization of pH levels in drinking water, as well as packaging materials for sweeteners that are moving traded across our region. On movement of services, I've developed two barometers. I hope you may have basically heard about them. The barometers really profile issues in the service industry, especially for service sectors that were committed to by all the partner states, to see the level of openness as well as the level of restrictiveness of those specific services. So I request that probably you visit those barometers on our website. You can take some time and you visit and you see where we are in terms of which countries liberalize this, what is the level of openness and what restrictions. And that can also inform you if you want to start your business with any of the partner states, specifically in trading services. On the tourist visa, we pushed for ensuring that ESC partner states have one single tourist visa. I'm happy to report that Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda are implementing a single tourist visa, with Burundi and Tanzania yet to join, and of course, hope also RSS will join, because that just means that when a tourist is coming from the US or Germany, if they pay from Burundi, from Uganda, then the tourist is able to access the tourist attractions of all the partner states without any challenges. So we appeal that other partner states will join. Well, this is our continuous push. On air transport services, we have undertaken research, as I said. We are pushing for extension of first, second, third, as well up to the fifth freedoms, as well as according our national treatment to other partner states aircraft, so that we bring down the cost of travel for not only passengers but also for cargo. So this is really something we're pushing for. It's a continuous process. It's not something that you can register as a win in an overnight due to intricacies and sensitivities that are manifested. But as our mandate is to push for that, we'll continue. And if you are able to also support us in this, we're really welcome to join our advocacy push. So these are the barometers that we have developed already that show what we are doing. And as I said, on one of the pillars that made the second pillar of our advocacy, we build on evidence-based advocacy, and therefore it's through our research that gives us the evidence to advance our advocacy. Are we still together? Hello? Sorry, I think you had lost me. Hello?
Hi, I think the system kicked off everyone because I'm also just rejoining.
Okay.
And I'm seeing quite a number of people are on hold. I don't know whether the others can hear us.
I don't know what happened really.
It could be a network challenge.
Zef, can you hear us?
Yes, Geoffrey, we've heard you very well, the presentation you made about EABC. So
But the thing
there's
is,
no any challenge.
I think the system kicked out everyone almost.
We can hear you,
able to?
Geoffrey.
Okay, you can see my presentation still?
Yes.
No? Okay. So as I was saying, we undertake evidence-based advocacy, and that's through research that we provide recommendations. And we can see this research that we did on the open skies to show the issues in air transport, as well as the two barometers that show the restrictiveness of the level of openness of sectors and subsectors, respective subsectors in the trade and services. And I appeal to you to read them. You can find them on our website. Of course, as I said, we organize various PPDs between 2022 and 2023, 2023 and 2024. We organized around 18 high-level public-private dialogues, and these engagements have really bore results for us because it's through the PPDs that we address our challenges to the respective policymakers and responsible ministries, departments, and agencies, most of which have really helped us to address our challenges. We have seen power in PPDs, and we look forward to really keep engaging through them. So maybe to speak specifically on trade and services sector desk, as I said, you remember in the slides about EABC, how we're structured and how we do advocacy. We have specific sector desks. And this EABC sector desk on trade and services, which I lead on, as I said, it handles most of work regarding implementing the EAC Common Market Protocol, liberalizing trade and services, harmonizing the domestic taxes. When we were in Tanzania recently, somebody mentioned that there's a lot of taxes on tourism products, and most of this is what really we handle on a daily basis on this space of taxes that are specific on services. ensuring that they are reduced or they're harmonized. Also, as I said, we do work on reducing costs, focus on reduce costs on air transport services. And here, our main aim is to domesticate the EAC skies to ensure that the cost of travel for passengers and cargo is reduced. We continue to push through the desk the free movement of workers. And here we are looking at harmonization of work permit regimes as well as the schedules of workers to ensure that we remove the work permit or harmonize the work permit regimes. Then we open our borders for workers providing services across our region. We still see a lot of challenges, a lot of restrictions in not allowing workers to move as they provided for in the Common Market Protocol, and that is what we push for through the desk. Through the telecommunications, I had someone, I think, from the Communications Commission of South Sudan, maybe will share an experience how it is. But as I said, we still see challenges, unharmonized rates and unharmonized charges on movement of capital, movement of money across our networks. And therefore, we push and appeal our partner states to remove restrictions so that people can communicate easily, but also can move money easily across our borders through the mobile money pockets. How do we do a small source or profile or get issues? How do we solicit them? We do annual engagement with NFPs. That's the national focal points that I mentioned that represent us at national level. We do regular engagements with professional bodies, especially bodies that provide or that organize the service providers. That's like, for example, the Association of Engineers, bankers, insurers, etc., to source issues from them. Of course, we do one-on-ones with members. If you have an issue, you're free to engage us. Then we take on your issues where maybe national focal points have not managed to representably. And then also we get issues through the researches, such as the barometer that I mentioned. These from the research that we do, they help us to get issues that we start tackling and providing intervention on. Maybe to speak about challenges that we face, specifically, but on our trading services desk, we lack a very centralized mechanism to scope and profile issues. As you saw, there are various levels through which we get issues, all those 4 areas, forms, if I say. But then I think what we were pushing for is to get a centralized mechanism through which issues can be sourced from at a national level. So when I say sourced, I solicit from at a national level, then we pick them up for intervention. So there's still a lack of a mechanism through which we can pick issues. It is easy enough for trading in goods because there is a NMC, the National Monetary Committee of NTBs. I think probably we need something similar, but that will be in the next presentation. I think Agatha will speak to this. Also, lack of a regional framework and platform for pursue PPDs. With the PPDs, we do ad hoc in nature. And but there's like a mechanism through which we can engage the public, the stakeholders from the policy space, and then can also help us to really address ourselves to them to be able to address to get the challenges resolved. Of course, this is a single desk that handles basically almost 8 countries now. It's under-resourced and understaffed, and therefore sometimes it's challenging to address ourselves or represent our members effectively due to of course, the scope of work quite high and quite demanding for a single person to address this, to handle and register effective policy representation. So we recommend that we establish a regional platform that meets regularly to pursue regional issues in the service sector across our region. Engage development partners, of course, to strengthen the desk to work effectively and do its work effectively and represent the members' needs in a more strengthened way. And of course, we're looking for an inclusive and training services policy agenda, and I think this will come out of this these consultative engagements and to address really training services related challenges. So this is basically what we do, but in terms of, for example, the benefits and how much you can always find on our website, but also my colleague Zephania is here. If there's a question, we're happy to respond. Thank you, and apologies for the network breakdowns, and I hope you are able to listen to me and see the presentation. And we'll definitely share all these materials by the end of the workshop today. Thank you very much, and in case of any questions, happy to receive and respond. And if there's none, then we'll continue with the next item of the program. Thank you very much. Hello, any questions?
I think we can continue, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. I think Agatha, then in the interest of time, you can take on. I'll stop sharing.
Okay. Please allow me to share. Okay. And maybe just to encourage everybody, if you have a question, I've noted some people saying you are not able to comment because the mics are disabled. You can post a question and they will enable the mic for you if you want to ask the, if you want to voice your question, so to speak. Can everybody see my presentation?
I can see it on my side.
And can everybody hear me? I've also noted on the chat, some people are saying we are too low. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect, perfect,
Yes,
perfect.
you're audible, yes.
Okay, so I had already talked, and first of all, thank you, Jeff, very much for that overview of the EABC. It's good for people to, we wanted to start with it, particularly for people to understand what EABC is about and their advocacy work. Because then when we talk about the advocacy agenda, we know what perhaps they are able to push or what we would like them to push for. And also when we talk about the proposed mechanism, we already have an idea of how they are structured, and we'll then be looking to see how can we build on that to make sure that the dialogue mechanisms are more institutionalized and more predictable. So that's one of the key takeaways I want you to have from the EABC presentation going forward. And now when we come to the rest of my presentation, just to give you a very quick outline of how I have put it. So I've started with an overview of the current state of trade in services in the EAC. But I've also started, particularly for those who may be new to services. I'm happy to see quite a good number of people that I met when we were developing the schedule of services. So I know at least the South Sudan team here is not new to services. But for those who may be joining that are new to services, we are going to start with just a quick overview of why services are important. And then we are going to look at a framework, or the framework we are using to develop this regional services policy advocacy agenda. and then some of the key barriers that EABC may take on as part of the advocacy agenda. After that, we are going to look at some options for the institutional framework for advocacy, and then we are going to close. So this is what I have planned. After every session, I will stop so that we can have any Q&A and so that we all move together. We don't leave it behind. So allow me to already start. So in terms of, sorry, I don't know whether you can see my screen well or this small thing there is disturbing you like it's disturbing me. So in terms of why services matter, I want to just give you a few statistics just to tell you how important services is. And already the chair, when he was speaking, raised some of these points. The first point, of course, is that currently services are what are driving economies. Even when we look at our own services, we see that now the global economic output is driven by services, and services actually now generate much more output towards GDP than, say, agriculture, which is our mainstay, or even manufacturing. And when we look at the statistics for EAC partner states, we see actually in the Republic of South Sudan, services contributed about 56.6% of the GDP. And this actually is the highest in the region. Although the data we have for South Sudan is 2022 based on the World Development Indicators. If you see for the other countries for 2023, we have 55.5 for Kenya and over 40% for Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi. I think the key message here is that service, when you think of our economies, they are majorly driven by services. And when we even look at the more developed countries, we see that almost 75% of their economies are service sector driven. The other point, of course, you have to even bear in mind when we are even thinking, say, of manufacturing or we are thinking of agriculture, is that services are essential inputs into these businesses. If you think, for example, I'm sure very many of you have a glass of water or a bottle of water near you. If you think of all the services that went into producing that water, including things that wouldn't usually be captured when you are thinking of the final price of that water. You are thinking there was accounting services that decided how much to price the water. There was engineering services that was used even in making that bottle or that glass that you are using. There were maybe legal services for the contracts, say the shop or the hotel has with the manufacturer of the water. All these are services that wouldn't usually be included when we are saying this is services contribution, but they are critical inputs into the business themselves, which again tells you that even when we think of agriculture, we think of manufacturing, services is significantly even much more than what the data actually collects. Sorry. Perhaps what is even more important is that services value add itself. So even where we see services, because across the region, these figures I have given here, these figures I've given here of the contribution, they've remained fairly steady over the last almost 10 years. But even if they have remained steady, what we find is that services itself is growing across the region. On an annual basis, if you look at the sectors whose growth, which are contributing to the annual growth of an economy, services are majorly doing this. We were not able to find any data for the Republic of South Sudan, as I said, because part of the information that is available is up to 2022. However, just looking at what we were able to find for the other EAC partner states, we see services are growing fastest, say, in Rwanda, where they are growing at 11.2%, followed by Tanzania, 7.3%. And we are anticipating that even in the Republic of South Sudan, the same trend would be observed. I know there is a lady who said she's from the National Statistics Bureau. I don't know whether in terms of the growth of sectors, this is some of the things that you are monitoring. And I'm sure if it is, then you would indeed say services are growing in tandem with what we are seeing in the rest of the region. And just to give you a graph here that speaks volumes in terms of the annual percentage growth of services, here you can see services are even growing faster than the way they were when we were thinking of COVID. You can see we are already past COVID. We are growing faster than we were doing even before COVID, which again talks about the resilience of the sector, and even how much it is able to use up a lot of some of the things that are coming up, like new technology, your ICT. Current before COVID, the thought of having a meeting like we are having, where I am seated in Nairobi, there is a team seated in Arusha, and there is a team in Uganda, as I heard from DRC, and now from the Republic of South Sudan. These were things that we didn't think about, yet this is a service that is now growing substantially. Again, just talking about how resilient the services sector is. So the second thing that is critical when we are thinking about services is that services is a major contributor to employment. And even when we look at the employment figures, we see across the region, services is contributing more than 25%, except in Burundi, in all partner states, and significantly high in Kenya at about 55.1%. And this again is in tandem with what we see in developing countries. We see a contribution of about 25 to 30%, so we are keeping to trend. The EABC barometer that Geoffrey talked about also had done like a 10-year analysis of how services have grown. And over a 10-year or perhaps 15-year period, you can see growth of more than 10% in terms of services contribution to employment. And the important thing here is even this data that I'm mentioning, which is based on the ILO, is based actually on formal employment. And what we already know is that the services sector is also one of the sectors where there is very high informality, and particularly when you think of subsectors like retail services. These are sectors where, if you think of perhaps the kiosk or the small duka, where you buy your milk, or you buy your airtime, or you buy, say, sugar, etc. These are some of the business units that will usually not be formal, but will support, will be counted, will support employment or income generation. And even when you think of something like open air markets, again, that is a service sector. They are offering retail, informal retail service, and again, a very significant contributor to employment. What we also see is that particularly for those who may be working to empower women, services is also one of the sectors where we see a lot of women employed. Even think, say, of your hospitality industry. A lot of women are majorly employed in the hospitality industry. In the education subsectors, you find also a lot of women are employed there. In the retail subsectors, even terms like Mama Boga came from the fact that you find a lot of women in some of these in some of these subsectors. The main point here is that if you are thinking of how do you enhance incomes for women, building and or supporting the growth of the services sector is one of the ways that you can do that. And when you look at this graph here, which is again based on ILO and picked from a report from the World Bank and WTO, is that you see the services contribution to gender actually cuts across very many countries. I mean, cuts across all income levels. So not just developed countries, although in developed countries you see it being very significant. In some countries it is as high as 87%. But you can see in the lower income and the in the lower middle income and in the low income, that growth has also been substantial, growing from about 19% in 2000 to about 30% in 2021 on average. Again, which speaks to what we are saying in terms of services growing, that's number one, but also services in terms of employment of women also being an area where growth is seen. When we come to trade, the other thing, of course, we find is that services is actually driving trade. And even more importantly, even when we think, say, of if we are exporting coffee, or say you are exporting cashew nuts, or you are exporting peanuts, or you are exporting gum arabic, which I know are some of the things that you export from the Republic of South Sudan, you need services. You need services like logistics. You need services, your freight forwarding, your transport. These are some of the key services that you will need even in merchandise trade. However, even when we look at the growth of merchandise trade and we look at the growth of services, we find services is growing much faster than merchandise trade, and this growth is actually even faster when we think of when we look at the least developed countries and developing countries. So while on average the share has grown from about 23.5% to about 33.5%. We see in terms of the actual growth in commercial services, this has grown by more than 300% for LDCs and 250%. Granted, despite this major growth, we are still a small player, if I may use that term, when it comes to international services trade. Now, when we dig deeper, say for the 8 EAC partner states, what we find particularly, I know for those who have attended some of the other consultative workshops, I kept on saying we are a net exporter, but we are a net exporter if we look at only the original 5 partner states. But when we actually 6, because that data also included South Sudan. But when we bring in our DRC and we bring in Somalia, we find that the region is a net importer of services. And on the whole, okay, I don't have the data here, but on the whole, we have imports worth about 23 billion against the exports, I think, of about 17 billion. Perhaps for the future ones, I will add to this. But here, what you see is that South Sudan, in terms of imports, you are a net importer. With imports worth about 2.7 billion. So this is in thousands of dollars, and this is based on the ITC trade map. We against exports of about 882 million US dollars. Again, you can see from the region, the contribution again, it's only Kenya and DRC that are net exporters of services. And when we dig deeper, perhaps into Republic of South Sudan, as I said, you have okay, up to 2022, you have exports worth about 318, not 800. Sorry, I think I have some wrong data here. You have export worth about 318, and your exports have also been growing steadily. If you can see, from about 140 million to about 318. If you are looking from 2018 to 2022, again, just indicating or confirming what we have seen happening in the globe in terms of growth of the services exports. When you look at what are your main exports, and here you can see the data is only up to 2021, the broken down data, which tells you that in actual fact, your figures are likely to be even higher. You can see transport is one of the key contributors with about 13.5%. Then you have construction sector, which again is growing majorly, again as a growing country. Then you have about 40 million for financial services. and you have 34 million for ICT or telecommunication and computer-related services. Then you have a very big spend here, which is about 206 million, which is your personal, cultural, and recreational services. This one is particularly related to money being sent for personal use, because as you know, for the Republic of South Sudan, you have quite a number of your people in other countries, so remittances to these people is also what is contributing to this high personal, cultural, and recreational services. And then, of course, you have goods, government-related goods and services, which is contributing about 92 million with government goods and services here. As you know, for government-related services, we don't usually capture them as commercial services because these are not services that government offers in competition with, say, with businesses, but they are, in any case, a service that government offers at a fee, and this, again, is captured in the data. When you look at what are the imports, again, you can see your major imports are, again, transport, about 961 million, followed by government-related services, as well as personal, cultural, and recreational services. Then you also have telecommunications, and you have financial services, again, just to give you an idea of what's pertaining. Trade-in services as a percentage of GDP, what we see again is that trade-in services contribute significantly to GDP. Very high in South Sudan. You can see the figure there is about 63%. But I think also this is a function of the state of development and being a new country, while in the other EAC partner states, it contributes about 13.2, the highest, which is by Rwanda, followed by Burundi, I believe, at about 12.5. What are some of the drivers of this services growth? I think this one doesn't even need explaining because we all know ICT is one of the key drivers, and we have seen a 54% increase in the total services that are delivered through ICT, so digitally delivered services, just based on 2022. And if you look back to 2005, that has been like a 375% increase in digitally delivered services. Again, I think COVID opened our eyes as countries in terms of just how much we could leverage technology to deliver a lot of the services. When you think of e-commerce, you think of your AIs and other things we are paying for, you think of your mobile fintech. All these are digitally delivered services that, say, 10 years ago were unheard of. But even as I say that, the fact of the matter is all services are growing. It's not just ICT. If you look at this graph here, and again, this is data from the WTO, what you can see is that even LDC is another developing country, so we are the red and the blue. You can see, like for transport, we are growing at about 15%. We are growing even faster in terms of personal, cultural, and recreational services. And mind you, here we have, say, the creative economies, the artists, the films that would usually then have been deemed not tradable, and we are now seeing that they are tradable. You can see also here, when we think of business services, your engineering, all professional services fall under business service. These are growing by almost 10%. Your telecommunication, more than almost 20%. Financial services also growing. Construction services also growing majorly. I think the point I'm trying to make here is that it's not just ICT that is driving the services sector. All services sectors are growing in tandem with services growth. One last, or perhaps two last slides. one of the other things that's important to note, of course, is that, and I know for the team from Burundi, this is something that we talked about. Forgive me. The team from RSS, the Republic of South Sudan, this is something we went into deep details when we were talking about the various modes that we deliver services or we supply services through. And what we find is that 2 key modes, or perhaps 3, are very critical when we are thinking particularly of attracting investment, which we call FDI, which is mode 3, which is commercial presence. This is how most of the commercial sector, how most of the commercial services are delivered. And in fact, that delivery takes about almost 7.8 trillion globally. And just to tell you again, when we are thinking of some of the barriers that may be influencing or may be affecting cross-border investment in each other's country, when we think of mode 3, these are the things that we want to look at. But what we know is that when we think of mode 3 and when we think of, say, statistics for commercial services like the ones I have shared, mode 3 is usually not captured in those statistics because the countries are already established in country, but they are captured when we think of foreign affiliates, the dividends they send back into their countries. And the easiest example to think about is think of the commercial banks that you have that are foreign. And when you look at some of their annual reports and you look at how much profit they are reporting from their foreign affiliates that they are then sending back home, it gives you a good understanding of how big this commercial presence is. In fact, if we were to add commercial presence into the broader commercial services data, we would see that services actually contribute about 43% of total trade, as opposed to about 22, which we see without the mode 3. Again, you can see some modes like cross-border supply, where the service is the one that moves, but the service supply and consumers stay in their own countries, takes a significant share of about 27.7. And this again is a good mode for, or not good, it's is a mode that very many developing countries use to try and test the market. Granted, there are some sectors that will lend themselves into to use here, but it is also about how we can leverage technology that we can then grow our mode 1. Our consumption abroad, particularly when we are thinking of, which is mode 2, when we are thinking of our tourism services. Again, this is one of the modes where within our control as countries we can help build. And then, of course, mode 4, which is presence of individuals, or what we call temporary movement or non-permanent employment, I believe is what the WTO calls it, when somebody is coming to deliver a contract or is coming for a business meeting. And again, these are it's one of the places where we find a lot of restrictions, yet when we really think about it and its contribution, we see it contributes, on the broader picture, it contributes significantly less than the other modes. Just one more slide before I pause, is that, again, when we think about services, there are also other key points to consider, particularly when you think about manufacturing and exporting. How productive you are or how competitive you are is also dependent on how you are applying services. Think of your logistics services, think of your engineering services, think even of your energy services. Then the costs associated with this have an impact on the cost of your final product, and then how competitive that product is in international markets. Then when we think of FDI, any company that wants to come and set up in your country, some of the key things they ask themselves are things to do with how connected you are from both a technology perspective, from a transport perspective, how much access, or how easy is it to access power and at what cost, how easy is it to access telecommunications at what cost. So all these things are critical when a country or an MNC, a multinational, is thinking, where do I then take my next investment? It looks at how developed our services sectors are to be able to make some of these decisions. The last thing, again, just to underscore why services is important, is that when we are thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals, if you think of things like healthcare, education, financial inclusion, all these are actually services. So if we are not growing education services or we are not growing healthcare services, then we are far from reaching our SDGs. With that, Geoffrey, I want to pause in case there are any questions so that we don't leave anyone behind. This was just to set our minds in terms of why services, why do we want to develop an agenda for services for EABC? Why is services important? That's what that section was meant to do. And I want to pause there in case there are any questions or clarifications so that we can move together. I pause for a while.
Thank you, Agatha, for the presentation. Any questions? Please feel free to open your mic or text. We'll be able to pick it up and relate here. Any questions?
And they may also send the questions on. They may also send the questions on. What's the term?
On the chat?
Yes.
Yes. On the chat box, we'll be here, be ready to pick it up. If you have a question at any time, just drop it there. We'll be able to pick it up and address it. I think there seems to be no question.
I see.
Yeah?
No, actually, I see one in terms of what best practices can neighboring countries can South Sudan adopt to enhance regional services efficiency. I think the first thing is to be, and this is my knee-jerk reaction, is not something I have studied in detail, but I would say some of the first things is actually to have a targeted strategy for developing services. I think when we were developing the schedule for services, we did note some of the key challenges across each sector. And I think very clear recommendations came up in terms of how to develop the sector. If you can have a strategy that is looking at developing services sector, and even when you look at the likes of Rwanda, even Kenya, when you think of services, and Uganda, actually, particularly Uganda, one of the things they have consistently had, Uganda and Rwanda, one of the things they've consistently had is a strategy for trading services or for services development that then guides you and helps you look at how do we leverage services better, both in terms of enhancing efficiency of the sector itself, but even in terms of services as an exportable service. So that would be one of the things that I would say. Of course, the second one is from an integration perspective, I think there is a lot to be done. I wait to see, I will open up for discussions and I'll see to what extent we have already submitted our, your schedule for commitments that we developed, and then how we are going about implementing it. Cesar, I'll give you the floor just now. To the person who has asked, how do we establish a sustainable mechanism? We are going to come to that section later in my presentation. So if you don't mind, hold on, and then we are going to come to you. Caesar, you have the floor, and then I'll come to you to come, Dixon.
Yeah, good morning.
Morning, Caesar.
Yes, I'm actually grateful for the two presentations. They're so good and they're so educative, and I'm very happy of that. Agatha, we know you very well, and we are now even friends, but we are surprised you did not visit South Sudan since then.
Caesar, unfortunately,
Hello?
Yes, I can hear
Yes.
you. Yes, I apologize. We were not able to hold this meeting in person, as would have been my wish, as you know very well. It is more based on the available resources. But as I said, part of what then we have been able to do is leverage technology to still engage, but we are hoping that in the future we will have more face-to-face meetings in South Sudan, Caesar.
That is great. I just want to shed a light on few issues
Yes.
based on presentation. The first thing that we have seen in some of the slides that there is no data about some activities in South Sudan, economic activities, which is very, very important, and we want EABC to take note of that. We need our data system or processing to be developed or to be at least supported. The second thing is about you are only focused on services that related to finance, ICT, engineering, and so on. And why not health sector and how it is contributing to the economy? It was not clear in your presentation. The third question actually is going to the previous presenter. It is about the policy advocacy based in South Sudan. I don't know whether they have checked on each capacity in each part in each East Africa state, because our capacity here to conduct policy advocacy activities is actually very, very low. All the business members organizations that really including policy advocacy as one of their objectives or activity, but they are not doing it in a way that to show it is really a structural evidence-based and something that can yield result. And now we are moving to the regional one. Actually, we are behind on that, and I don't know how we are going to integrate ourselves in the region or how we will be supported. This is all from my side. I hope my questions are clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caesar. Yes, your questions are clear. I want to, because I saw Mr. Dixon had his hand up, let us also take his questions and then we will answer them at once. Dixon, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation and the chairman. Yeah, my name is Dixon. I'm in Kampala. I lead the Uganda cashew nut value chain. I've had your discussion and you seem to speak it very well when you say that agriculture is our mainstay. And I really think that I'm shocked when I move around East Africa. I've been privileged to be almost everywhere. And I'm shocked the way I see a lot of idle land. And when of cashew nuts globally, like it's really a cash cow, and people don't seem to be noticing. As you all know, we are not productive. Of course, we depend on the East African Business Council. Whatever you people are doing, I think you're working much far better than even the states in the community. So I think at the level of the East African Business Council, we should be having ideologies which can actually turn out agriculture as a service. If you see like productivity, to raise production, especially if we can export the services to these DRC, because there's a lot of, you know, idle land and people seem not to know anything to do with this. So the way you're talking about services, yes, let's know the services as in a business, but let's be productive in businesses or services that are really our mainstays. Yeah, we cannot just keep saying we want to be modern, we want to be what, when in actual sense, we are not even producing what we need. So I don't know what you think about it, but I feel like you need to address agricultural business much more than anything else, because people will get jobs all over the community. So that's what I wanted to say. And I just wanted to encourage you people to assert it and make sure that people in the community can really buy into the services, especially provided by the East African Business Council on an agribusiness standpoint. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dixon. We will respond to that issue. Felix, you have the floor.
First, I would like to say good morning, members, and I would thank the chairperson for this meeting as South Sudan is leading. I actually just want to give a comment on the issue of what our colleague has just said, that is agriculture. Well, I don't know whether some people will also agree with me, is that in our country here, I'm just trying to suggest that if East African community can also address this issue, because in for our country here, we had a different different type of system that we have. I just want to say something about the agriculture here, although I'm not an agriculturist and I've not gone through all the countries or even the whole country, but I see that what our colleagues have just said, let us also raise it as a concern to the whole East African community, that we actually have to put forward agriculture as the first priority for us, just to, especially to our country here. And what hinders this activity to be done in our country is that we are actually facing a lot of insecurity in most cases, and that should be put in quotation, that let's also raise it as a concern to the mother East African community, that if we want actually agriculture to be one of the best to provide local food to all the communities, we have to also understand that the communities that are actually doing this thing need to have secured, or let's say there must be actually a security to address, say, the agriculture system in our country. I'm sorry for interruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felix. And it is not an interruption at all. That is why we are having a consultative meeting. Everybody should ask the questions that they have. Maybe I start with responding to your question on agriculture, and in a way also indirectly respond, or not indirectly, directly also respond to Dixon. The only reason we are hammering on services is because this is a meeting specifically on services, but EABC has other ongoing work that actually focuses on goods, and I believe they have had even meetings that are focusing on development of value chains. But I hear you in terms of the importance of the agricultural sector and the need to support it. So not just EABC, even EAC, as part of their industrialization policy and strategy, it has identified the agricultural sector as one of the key sectors for development. And I believe quite a number of agricultural products were identified for more integration of the value chains. I don't have the data at the tip of my fingers, but I can tell you there is ongoing work that is focused on enhancing the agricultural sector across the region. I think there is undisputed acknowledgement that agriculture is an economic mainstay for the region. In terms of employment, it's still employing most of the people in the region. And in terms of the potential for growth, it is still has a lot of potential for growth, particularly when we move from subsistence farming to now looking at agriculture from a more agribusiness perspective. So I hear you, Dixon, when you talk about a lot of arable land. I was actually just joking. I was in Kampala last week and I was standing somewhere and I saw a plot of land and I was saying in Kenya, this would be a plot of land that is grabbed in 2 seconds because there is a lot of potential to develop the agricultural sector. So I fully hear you and the focus of this meeting is not to say that agriculture is not important. It is important. And services actually requires even sectors like agriculture for it to feed into the service, to feed into the economy in terms of the support it gives. But EABC is focusing on it through other projects, not this one, as well as the EAC Secretariat. So I hope that gives you some assurance that the agriculture sector is not ignored by the fact that we are not talking about it here. It is fully embraced. Now, if I come to the questions that Caesar asked, yes, data is a challenge, and in fact, it will be one of the issues that we will talk about even when we look at the issues that we want EABC to advocate on. We acknowledge this. In terms of health services, I may not have mentioned it again, which in a way also leads to the, is based on the first question you asked. In terms of data availability. So data availability in terms of trade in health services is not something that is currently captured. If we just go back to the presentation, hold on. If you go back to the presentation, if you see, sorry, I move across and then it stops working. Okay, hold on. So I wanted to say, this is how data is usually captured, and what you can see here, they don't have, or they don't usually capture, or they haven't started capturing health-related services, but I acknowledge their importance, particularly when we think of the disease burden. We think of issues like the meeting our SDG goals on affordable healthcare to our citizens. They are important, but of course, as you know, within the EAC, the healthcare service is not one of the services that was prioritized initially under the integration, and this is something I'm going to come to just now, but it is one of the sectors that we are looking to liberalize as part of the second phase of liberalization, and I am expecting that in the future we shall then, of course, have much more focus on health services. How to enhance advocacy in the regions? I think this question in a way also talks to the issues of institutional mechanism, which we will deal with later in this presentation. But the point is made, yes, that advocacy at the regional level is only as strong as how strong the advocacy bodies at the national level are. And I can tell you, even in the engagements we've had so far, EABC was tasked or was asked whether there is scope to support the enhancement of BMOs at national level, or the organization of BMOs at national level, so that there is a stronger common voice. I think there is, of course, the question of what EABC is able to do from Arusha, but it is a point that, of course, is made. And I think it's an ongoing discussion in terms of how EABC can support the enhancement of service-related dialogue, even at national level. I want to stop there, but maybe invite Geoffrey just to weigh in on a number of these things. You might want to say what you are doing in the agricultural sector, because I recall sometime last year you had a series of meetings on agriculture, value chains within agriculture. You can maybe weigh in, or your team. I know you have a team with you who can speak a little bit about some of the work you're doing in agriculture. I submit.
Thank you. Thank
Dixon, may we request you to mute? We can hear you. And Geoffrey, we can't hear you if you are speaking. Dixon, Amos, Joseph, please mute. Geoffrey or EABC, do you want to weigh in on the issue of agriculture, or I can proceed?
Hello?
Hello?
I think my network skipped. I was saying, in terms of strengthening the advocacy work with the Republic of South Sudan, I would say we actively work with the South Sudan Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture while developing our annual policy agenda. We have engagements with them to give us issues that we can support them in terms of advocating for them. So we have a continuous engagement with the chamber, but of course, here is how we want to, maybe by the end of the meeting workshop today, to develop a more structured and strengthened way of how you think we can support you further. And usually we work with the chamber. We have done a lot of work, exactly, especially in addressing border-related issues, well, moving of goods. But little has been done, I would say, in terms of the trade services. And here is really we count on your ideas and your advice on how do you foresee a better structured way of how we can undertake advocacy as well as supporting you. So I would say we've been working with strongly with the chamber in terms of getting issues, in terms of supporting on public-private dialogues that we have frequently held in Juba and elsewhere. But of course, here we, as Agatha said, we want to see, we also hear from you how you feel, especially in the areas of trade and services, how you feel we could actually work with you better, support you better, so that advocacy can be easily and effectively done. I don't know whether Frank Duffer, who holds the portfolio of agriculture, is on the call, still on the call. We have done a lot of work in supporting agriculture value chains through trademark as well as ICT support. Frank, if you're still on the call, you would also weigh in this area.
Unfortunately, Frank Duffer has dropped off. I think he has another meeting. But we are also, I mean, under AGRA, we are also having a project here where we are trying to enhance the agricultural cross-border trade, looking at the NTBs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we have done a lot of work in supporting, especially key value chains in coffee, tea, basically the value chains that are supported by ITC, but also on AGRA in terms of enhancing standards for movement of agriculture-related products, the standards that support market access for movement of to enable movement of these agriculture produce across our region, so that if a standard is accepted in Kenya, then if a product is certified in Kenya, then it should access the Ugandan market easily without retesting or recertification. So we have done a lot of work, and of course it's continuous, but we're happy to engage with the chamber again to actually demonstrate what these initiatives have produced in terms of advocacy work. Please, I also appeal that you look at our policy agenda, which is on our website. It has most of the details of a lot of work that we have undertaken throughout our region, including the agri-based services. Thank you.
Okay, may I continue?
Yes, please, Agatha, you can go. I think there's no other question.
Okay. Okay, we'll open it up after this session. So now I want to look at trading services within the EAC. And as we know, our constitutive document is the Treaty for the Establishment of the EAC, which we call the EAC Treaty 1999 because it was signed in 1999. And sorry, may I request EABC to mute everyone? Well, except me. So under the treaty, specifically Chapter 17, the EAC partner states do provide for liberalization of services. Article 104 specifically asks us that partner states adopt measures to achieve the free movement of persons, labor, services, and to ensure the right of establishment and residence. And as you know, the rights of establishment and residence are very critical when we are thinking of commercial presence. Actually, the right of establishment is part of commercial presence, so there is a very clear tie-in. And if you're establishing a company, then also you have to think of being resident in that country, so the rights of residency are also critical for you. So that's why I have put them together. And what the treaty then what the treaty calls for is that partner states conclude a protocol to provide for these obligations. And we have been able to do this as the community through the Common Market Protocol, which, as you know, was signed in 2010. And became, which actually was signed, I believe, in 2009 and came into force in July 2010. Under Part F of the Common Market, you know, the Common Market provides for free movement of goods, services, labor, workers, as well as now the two rights of establishment and residence, and very many other things, including cooperation on investment, cooperation on public procurement, industrialization. So it provides for really the creation of a common market across the EAC. And Part F, which I have talked about, which is specifically Articles 19 to 23, the ones that are dedicated to services. And within this, we commit as EAC partner states to scale up trade and investment in services sector through guaranteeing the free movement of services under the four modes of supply. And I've already talked about those four modes of supply. And then we've also agreed to remove any restrictions that would make it difficult for people to do business with us or to trade in services, as well as not to introduce any new ones. So two things we have agreed to. First of all, if our laws have any restrictions for the sectors that we have liberalized, let me put it that way, for the sectors that we commit to liberalize, we've committed to remove those restrictions and not to introduce new ones. Now, of course, as you know, when we were going through the schedule, we did talk about the schedules of commitment and how, if you intend to maintain any restrictions or any limitations, you have to include them in your schedule. I think this is well understood, but maybe just to talk about some of the key obligations. Number one is on national treatment. So if we commit to liberalize a subsector, what the protocol then expects of us is that we shall we shall treat the services from other EAC partner states and the service providers from other EAC partner states the same way we treat services from our own country. So it doesn't necessarily call for identical treatment. So the treatment can be identical or not identical. And when it is not formally identical, the requirement is that it is not so different that it then modifies the conditions of competition. And if I put it in layman terms, it is not so different that it gives an advantage to your domestic service suppliers or to your domestic services at the expense of the services from other EAC partner states. So that is one of the provisions of national treatment, that if we have committed to liberalize a sector, unless we have included limitations in our schedule, then we are expected to ensure that we are offering the same treatment that we offer our domestic suppliers. And same treatment will even be in terms of how much of your market am I accessing. It will be in terms of how much licensing fees am I paying. If there is registration required, how much am I paying for registration? What are you requiring of me for me to even be registered? So these are some of the aspects that you look at when you are thinking of, am I offering national treatment? The other thing, of course, is most favored nation treatment, which we call MFN. And the protocol obligates that we shall accord to services and service providers from other partner states no treatment less favorable than we give to services and service suppliers of other partner states or third parties. In short, what we are saying is that we shall not have favorites. So if I am, say, between Kenya and South Sudan, we agree that we are services from our country can move around without any need, say, for registration, or that I shall automatically recognize your qualifications. Ideally, that same service is directly extended to other EAC partner states, because within EAC we are not, integration is not based on reciprocal basis. It's based on MFN treatment, that the best treatment you are offering any other partner state or any other third party. When I say third party, let's say you get into an agreement with India or you get into an agreement with the US and you agree to offer them better service than what you are offering EAC partner states, then EAC partner states are entitled to that better service based on our common market protocol. The other point, of course, is on market access. Although market access, as the provision on market access is not included in the protocol per se, this has now been included in the revised schedule, and I'll talk about the revised schedule just now. But we are guaranteeing, if again in our schedules, we guarantee that we are allowing access to our markets. And if we don't allow access to our markets, then we put the various limitations that we would like. So some of these limitations may even be on things like economic needs test or labor market test. As you know, when we say economic needs test, we would then say, I will only allow you into my market if I can prove that the service you're offering is a service I need and it is going to add to my market. And we currently don't have sufficient sufficiency in that service. Or if it is, say, on labor, if you're bringing in, if you are a service supplier, say, coming to build a bridge, and I have to then show that we don't have sufficient engineers or that kind of thing. If, say, it is on establishment, you could even put limitations like you can only come in through joint venture. So that is like the type of entry that I can have. So all these are different measures that partner states should not maintain in their laws, in their domestic laws, unless they have already included them in the schedule. And since this is not specifically to talk about how to schedule, I think we already did that very well, and we already provided for this. But it is just to show the sort of things, the sort of obligations that are arising from the Common Market Protocol. And then, of course, there are other obligations like notification, where we are expected to tell the council or to formally inform the EAC Secretariat or inform the Council of Ministers through the EAC Secretariat of any measures, both domestic or international, that may affect the ability of other EAC partner states to partake or benefit from the free movement of services that we have offered. The same thing on domestic regulation here is to ensure that even as we put in place the various regulations, and remember, in services, and unlike in goods, where in goods you can put a tariff to limit how much is coming into your country. In services, we limit usually through regulations, and in those regulations, then we put in any limits that, or we restrict through putting any limits that we may want to maintain. But that doesn't mean that countries can still not regulate their sectors as they want. The protocol is clear. Partner states still have the ability to regulate their services, but they must ensure that the regulations they put do not become barriers. They do not impair any liberalization they have made. Now, and maybe to go to the point that somebody asked about the health services. So in the initial stages and through what we call Annex 5, which is the schedule of commitments from the 5 partner states that have now produced a schedule, we liberalized 7 priority sectors, and these are the 7 sectors here. So business services, and as you know, business services is very wide. It includes, say, professional services. It includes computer and related services, includes R&D, includes even things like marketing, management, consulting, photography, security services, you name it. All that falls under business services. Then we have communication services, distribution services, education, tourism, and transport. So those are the 7 subsectors we initially liberalized. But we also committed in Article 23 that we shall, in the future, liberalize the other additional sectors. In fact, we have committed to progressive liberalization. And when we say progressive here, is that even within those 7 sectors, we did not fully liberalize them, which I think even takes me back to the next slide, is we used what we call a positive list approach, meaning that every country only made commitments in the subsectors within those 7 sectors that it was willing to. And here, when we say willing to, each country, of course, was expected to go back and have an internal discussion in terms of what is our interest as a country, which sectors do we want to liberalize, and why do we want to liberalize them in terms of the growth and future of our region. So 2 major considerations is where do we feel we can export, we have capacity to export, and also where do we feel we have gaps where we need services to come in and plug in those gaps. So we used that approach where each partner state made its own commitments. And what happened is that when we then came together and looked at what we have liberalized, we found that countries have liberalized very different sectors. And in actual fact, only 16 subsectors were committed by all the EAC partner states. And because of that, there was the feeling that we haven't yet created the necessary foundation for a real common market in services. And the Sectoral Council for Trade, Finance and Industry, STIFI, asked EAC partner states to enhance their commitments by increasing the number of subsectors they have committed to a minimum of 78. So when you look at these subsectors that partner states have committed, we see that Tanzania and Kenya had committed the lowest at 46 and 57, followed by Burundi at 74. But Rwanda and Uganda had made quite major commitments. Now, what we have done, of course, is that countries have gone back to the table. With support of EAC, we have been able to revise the schedule of commitments, and we have now a revised schedule of commitments, which was adopted by STIFI in 2019. And within this, you can see that all countries have now enhanced their commitments. And Burundi now has 86, Kenya has 86, Rwanda has 98. They removed two commitments that were related to air freight and passenger and air freight. Tanzania has 79 and Uganda has 99. In total, we all added about 92 subsectors, and in fact, we now have about 36 or more. I should check, but about 36 subsectors that are committed by all EAC partner states, which in a way works towards then creating that common market for services. Now, when you will see here, I have not mentioned South Sudan because by the time we were drawing the original schedule, you had then not drawn your own schedule of commitments, or the old schedule. In the revised schedule, even then you had not drawn up your schedule of commitments. But as you know, after joining to become a full member, you are obligated to develop your schedule. And I believe that we were able to do that last year. I don't know how far this has gone, whether it has been submitted already officially to the EAC, perhaps the team that is attending. And I also saw Thomas from the ministry is attending, can also update us on how far that schedule has gone. But within that, within the EAC, all EAC partner states, once they join and you have then had a chance to get updated on EAC obligations. This is one of the obligations that you are expected to meet. So I want to pause there again for 2 minutes so that we move together in case there are any questions. I have deliberately not shared the schedule that was developed for South Sudan because, one, I don't believe it is yet a public document. Perhaps it is. And I also remember that South Sudan had wanted to have a national consultation on the same before it is submitted. So maybe as I pose here, maybe even we can invite, I don't know whether Thomas is still on the line, or one of the colleagues from South Sudan, just to update us on where you are. And I also open up the section for any discussions. Granted, of course, I am doing a very high-level overview. There is a lot more we could discuss in this sector. And there is a section that is coming in terms of how far we in terms of implementation and what are some of the major challenges that we are experiencing that could form the EABC agenda. So we are coming to that. So don't worry, even if I pause here. So I pause for inputs and any questions. Thank you. Jeffrey, over to you.
Thanks, Agatha. Any question, colleagues? Trying to see on the chat if there's any questions? Okay, Agatha, there's no question. I could go ahead.
Okay, no problem. Although I did have a question, can somebody, if Thomas is on the line, can he tell us how far they are in terms of finalization finalization of the schedule of commitments from South Sudan? Is it now a public document? Can we start sharing? Or any changes made? Anybody from South Sudan who would like to weigh in on this one?
Zeph, do you see Mr. Thomas on the call? I'm unable to see people on the call on my end.
Okay, and also I don't know why my laptop is hanging once I go to full presentation mode, and I don't want to remove it. It might stop working. Anybody, any hand raised?
There's no hand. Oh, there's a hand. There's a hand.
Oh, there is John Chol. Hello, Chol.
Yes, John.
Hello.
He's
Mr. John, please.
muted, I think.
EABC, can you unmute John?
Gift, please unmute John. He needs to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, he has unmuted his mic. I think he can just speak.
Hello, John, you have the floor. We can't hear you. Hello, John. Okay, maybe he's having a challenge with his mic. So if you are able to, John, at any point, do raise your hand and we will give you the floor again. Shall I proceed?
Yes, Agatha. John will submit as soon as he opens his mic.
Okay, no worries. So let me proceed. I see there is also another. Okay, it's still John Chon. John, you have the floor. I see your hand up. You may speak if you're able to. Okay, he will join us at some point. The other thing I wanted to talk about is before we even look at the framework, before we even look at the barriers, I just wanted to very quickly talk about the framework that we are using. I think this slide in any research before they can come up with, say, the solutions or the policy advocacy points that we want them to push. But ideally, we should highlight all the key challenges that we are facing. Now, why this is important is that, number one, we want to have a structured way of looking at barriers in trade in services. As you had in goods, there's already a lot of work that has been going on. We have the NTB monitoring mechanism, and we have the time-bound framework for removal of NTBs that is regularly updated. And in fact, reported even at the council level in terms of these were the barriers that were reported. This is how they have been addressed. These are the ones that remain not addressed. We want that sort of system where service sector issues and barriers are discussed, and there is a structured way of ensuring that they are being addressed. Then, of course, the other key point is that we want to speak with a louder voice. These are some of the important aspects of advocacy, is that we are united in the agenda that we are pushing. But beyond that, united in the agenda that we are pushing, is that one of the things we must always bear in mind is that even though we are a community, integration or businesses happen at the national levels. laws are still being made at the national levels. And ideally, what we should do is that we are then having a common agenda of key issues that we are pushing both at the regional level and at the national level. Then, of course, and somebody talked about it, is the issue of driving evidence-based policy. Policy agenda is to be clear that these are the issues. As I said, EABC may need to go back to may need to dig a little bit more into some of the issues we shall identify, but at least they already will have an idea of what the issues are. And lastly, why we want this agenda is to ensure there is sustained engagement between businesses and policymakers, and we shall talk about that later in this presentation. Now, what we are hoping to do is ensure we have identified the priority issues, and also we are clear about the actionable advocacy points. What do we want EABC to do? So if we say professional qualifications are not being recognized across the region, what do we want EABC to do about it? So these are some of the things that we want. Then, of course, as we know, we also have the AFCFTA where we are negotiating services. We have the EAC where we are negotiating services. And we have to ensure that across all of them, there is an alignment of recommendations we are giving. And as I said again, we want to ensure there is sustained dialogue between the private sector and the public sector. So the criteria we have used, I know I've put it here like proposed, but it is the one that we have used, is to see whether an issue is a major barrier to cross-border services trade, and that issue affects more than one country, and that there is also a clear policy or legal action to resolve it, and that there is something that EABC can do about it. So private sector advocacy can lead to government commitment. And of course, going back to the objectives that we said, we also want something that is realistic, that is smart, that is measurable. So the last criteria we are having is to ensure that it is something that can be achievable within the 5 years that we are working with. Granted, even if it is not achieved within those 5 years, we expect EABC to still take it forward, as part of their advocacy. So some of course, the other considerations, and this will also come up when we are dealing with the institutional framework, is who leads on this advocacy effort? Is it just EABC? Is it EABC and sectoral associations? Is it EABC working with EAC? So these are some of the things that we want to ensure we discuss, and also how to best coordinate national and regional efforts, and how to, again, as I've said, institutionalize these dialogue mechanisms. So allow me now to look at the key barriers. And before I do that, I just wanted, I know Geoffrey already talked about some of the achievements that have been made, but sometimes when we talk about barriers, it may seem like there is nothing good that is happening across the region, yet there is a lot of good things that are happening across the region. Even on the services agenda, we have seen key improvements. So I just wanted to mention a few of them, and as Geoffrey has said, when you look at the barometer, and this is a barometer that they do every 2 years to see what have been the development, there are actual developments that can be seen. And for almost all partner states, we see that new laws that are coming are also bearing in mind some of the obligations under the EAC and providing for them. Of course, there are also very many new laws that are coming that have ignored obligations under the EAC, but this is why, again, we have to have this constant engagement with the public sector to ensure that the services agenda remains at the top of their at the back of their minds, even as they come up with new laws. If you look specifically, here, if we look at it specifically, we can see that, so at the cross-cutting level, one of the things we have done is have had that revised schedule. And so we can just talk about revised schedule in terms of the 92 sectors that have been added. But beyond that, there was a lot of work that went in to remove what were discrepancies, errors, and inconsistencies in the original schedule that made it very difficult to understand even what were the commitments and to understand where were the opportunities for businesses. So EAC has been able to do this. And I think this has been one of the key things. The second thing, of course, is that there has been the finalization of Annex 7 on the EAC Common Market Mutual Recognition of Academic and Professional Qualifications. And the important thing about this then is that it will make it much easier. It provides the framework within which MRAs can be, number one, revised if necessary, but also new MRAs be concluded. And again, I think this has been almost 9 years in the making, and it is a key thing that we can recognize. We've also developed a mechanism for the removal of restrictions on trading services. This is something that the EAC has been developing, and also intend to turn it into an online system where businesses can report restrictions that they come across as they go about their everyday business on a real-time basis, if I may use the term. I think the other major thing is, of course, as you know, we have also developed an EAC strategy for trading services that has identified quite a number of interventions that are required, not just to grow services, but also to enhance the capacity of private sector to trade across the region. And this strategy started implementation in 2023, and it's a 10-year strategy going up to 2032. Perhaps even more importantly is that EAC has been able to mobilize resources to implement, part of the resources needed to implement this strategy, which again is a very big thing. At the sector level, some of the key developments is that 4 mutual recognition agreements have been finalized for accounting, engineering, architecture, and veterinary services. And I know that I don't know whether this did happen, but South Sudan was to join the engineering MRA sometime last year. I'm hoping this did happen. In the banking sector also, there are quite a number of laws that have been harmonized. And there are also in the tourism sector, we have things like the one tourist visa, we have things like a common hotel classification. In communication, we have the one network area. So there are at the sector level quite a number of things that have taken place that again just show it's not just talk. There is a bit of implementation of the commitments. Now, I want to talk about the potential advocacy issues as well as the barriers. Now, one of the things I did is that I went back to the issues that were discussed when we were developing the schedule of commitments for the Republic of South Sudan, because I think these are critical. There were issues that you had already identified, and I see EABC also playing a role in this. So I wanted to highlight a number of them before I talk about some of the general barriers that we have also recognized across the region. So one of the things that was raised in South Sudan is that quite a number of regulations and institutions needed for you to implement your schedule of commitments were not in place. And I believe EABC, this is also something you can work with the Chamber of Commerce and with the stakeholders in South Sudan to support the development of. And also the other thing that was raised was support to South Sudan to accede to existing MRAs. Then it was for engineering, architects, and quantity surveyors. I think the one for engineers, you have acceded to it. Again, you will let me know. And then there was also request for support to prepare the schedule for the free movement of workers. And part of what I see EABC doing here. Sorry, can somebody mute? So one of the things I see you doing here is.
Mr. Amos Joseph, if you could kindly mute. Thank you.
So one of the things I see EABC doing here is just even capacity building on the schedule on free movement of services or free movement of services, free movement of workers and what that pertains, what that entails, and then how the Republic of South Sudan could go about preparing their schedule. The other one was on sensitization. On the opportunities arising from the Common Market Protocol or the EAC integration. Again, this is one of the areas where I think EABC, in terms of sensitization of businesses, of opportunities arising from the integration process, and also to support the Republic of South Sudan in terms of the common market, what other partner states have committed, what the common market itself provides for. As you recall, EABC, when the common market was signed, there was a lot of capacity building and awareness creation specifically to businesses about the common market, its provisions. And countries like South Sudan, who had not yet joined, did not benefit from this. So, and again, this is work that EABC did. So I am thinking this is also work that you can continue in terms of the support specifically for South Sudan, particularly again because this sort of capacity buildings, awareness creation will benefit the whole region as a whole, not just South Sudan. So these are some of the other things we can add to the issues that had already been identified, and now I'm talking about those other issues. Now, even before I talk about them, maybe one of the things I should do is tell you how we went about identifying this issue. So as you know, we have the EAC strategy for trading services, and we also have the EAC barometer, and both are documents that have identified a number of the restrictions in trading services. So we use that to come to identify or to already isolate some things that we believe EABC can take a lead on. But again, subject to your inputs in terms of where you see EABC adding most value. So the number one thing is on the regulatory and policy inconsistencies across the region. What we find is that very many countries, actually all countries, no country is fully implementing its obligations. Very many of us, not very many, all of us have not fully domesticated our obligations across the EAC. So we have not yet reviewed our national laws to align them with our commitments at the regional level. And when I say all of us, even when you look at that mechanism for removal of restrictions, you will see there are restrictions and barriers across all EAC partner states. So none of the partner states is compliant. And then, of course, even when you look at things like licensing or like registration requirements, even take any sector, even take, say, engineering sector, even the definition of an engineer, how long you should already have gone you should have gone to school, how you are recognized, how you are registered, what are the documents you require for registration, how much do you pay for registration, all that varies across the region. And if we are really thinking about a common market, say for engineering services, or a common market for doctors, or a common market for accountants, we then find it becomes that much more difficult to move across if some of these things are not aligned. The second one, and I think in a way I have talked a little bit about it, is when you think of the mutual recognition of the mutual recognition agreement, because as we know, across the region, we have different training systems, different curricula, to the extent that we are then not recognizing the qualifications from each other's partner state, or how much we are charging, say, for registration, or in fact, we still require work permit fees. We still require work permit for service sector movement, particularly for Mode 4, where we are talking about things like intercorporate transferees, or if you're staying for long, you will find, if you are, say, a contractual service supplier, you will require a work permit. All these are requirements that discourage that movement of services and service suppliers. Then I think I have already talked about the varying qualifications and standards. Again, that makes it even much harder to conclude MRAs. And I think these are some of the challenges that EABC can take a lead on in terms of advocacy. The other point is in terms of limited market access. So here, as I said, we've already adopted a revised schedule, but that revised schedule has not been finalized. The one for South Sudan, I don't know how far it has gone. Again, it is one of the things that needs to be finalized, and the same for DRC and Somalia, if we are thinking of, again, creating that huge market. Then, of course, when you think of market access, there are some major restrictions also we find in our laws that are not captured in our schedules of commitment. In many sectors, you will find joint venture requirements, but they are not yet, they were not included, such limitations were not included in our schedules. High cost of doing business, particularly because of tax disparities. We find different taxation. Even more importantly, we are yet to implement the double taxation agreement. So you find businesses are taxed twice in their own country and in the country they are exporting to. And like, if I just talk on our behalf, because we are not implementing this double taxation, you then end up paying tax on full amounts, from which even other tax in the country where you're providing the service has already been deducted. And this, to the point that was raised already on lack of availability of data, this actually is not just a South Sudan specific challenge. It's a challenge that cuts across the region. So we have limited trade statistics data on services. We are not able to say who we are trading with, except actually for Uganda, which I know has been able to produce specific data on trading services, including trading partners. But that they have also acknowledged the challenge of getting adequate data. And then besides the broader services flows, even data that is specific to sectors, like now if you want to look at, say, insurance sector, okay, perhaps insurance has good data. Let's say we want to look at engineering sector or any other professional sector, and you want to see how big is the sector, how many players do you have, how much does the sector contribute to GDP, how much does the sector contribute to employment, how much is the sector contributing, say, to exporting. These are some of the challenges that we find across the region. Granted, on some of this, there is already ongoing work with the EAC, but for services, private sector is particularly critical when it comes to collection of data, because it is the one that then shares this data with the bureaus of statistics. So EABC here has a role to play, particularly in terms of supporting the EAC in sensitizing private sector on the data collection methodologies that I know the statistics department has developed, and even then working with the EAC sector to reach businesses to collect this data in a regular and timely manner. These are some of the things that EABC can do. The other point, of course, where EABC has a major role to play is the lack of targeted export development programs or lack of targeted export-related capacity building for private sector that are interested in exporting services. There is a lot of export development programs that are focusing on goods, but very few focusing on services. And we see this as an area where EABC has a major role to play. Now, when we go specifically at the business level, for business and professional services, I think I've already spoken a bit about this when we think of MRAs. So there are many sectors that don't have MRAs. There are also sectors that have MRAs that are not fully implemented. And then we have things like inconsistent licensing or accreditation requirements. And we also have limited regulatory framework for emerging professions. For an example, ICT-related services. I think this is also an area where EABC has a role to play, and I'm happy to also say I saw an advertisement from the EAC where they are looking to understand the regulatory framework for ICT services, ICT-based professionals. So this is also an area where I think EABC can collaborate closely with the EAC. And in a way, it also builds to this point on ICT and digital trade. So things like non-harmonized regulations on ICT, on things like e-commerce and digital trade also have an impact on how well we can leverage we can leverage IT. I know most of the countries have now joined HONOR, but again, when you look at the cost of telecommunication, and you even look at even the costs that we still pay on roaming charges, we find that on average, we are still significantly very expensive. There was a study that was done, and even I believe ITU produces this regular data in terms of costs, even cost of things like bandwidth, significantly very high compared to the region. And you know, some of these costs then also have a bearing on the overall cost of the goods we produce or the services we export, and how competitive we can be in those markets. Then we don't have a regional framework for things like e-commerce and digital taxation. And again, these are some of the issues that again are raised where even when you think of digital issues, say in tourism, when we are thinking how do you tax things like Airbnbs, or how do you tax online bookings, or the likes of your Uber, all these are services but are still related, that are delivered through technology, and there is need to harmonize our approach to some of these things. And we believe EABC can take a lead on some of these things. When we come to transport and logistics, issues to do with non-harmonized transport regulations and border delays. We've had stories of queues at borders that go kilometers and kilometers. Granted, there has been a lot of improvement, even in time to cross borders, but still there is room room to improve and to engage further. Issues like axle load requirements and even the calibration of equipment that is used. These are issues that you consistently hear from businesses. Then we have say issues on cabotage, where if you are not allowed to carry cargo within a country you are passing. So if you don't have cargo to carry back, if you are carrying imports, then it means your truck goes empty, and that has an implication on the cost, because that is fuel that is being burnt for no reason. Then it means that whomever's cargo is being carried, whether to or fro, then ends up paying a much higher price. We have non-uniform fuel levies and road user fees. Again, this is an issue that has been discussed very many times. On air transport, very high cost of taxation. as well as limited air traffic rights that again make it much, much more difficult to move. That is why you will find somebody coming to Kenya is first of all sent to Addis for 3 hours before you can move, a journey that is just a few minutes if you are to fly direct. Again, some issues that we need to address. Financial sector, still a number of banking regulations that are yet to be harmonized. Things like interoperability of mobile and digital payment systems. You should be able to pay with digital money from wherever you are. These are things that we still can work on. High capital requirements is also a thing that has been raised, as well as non-portability of insurance services, that if I have insured my vehicle here in Kenya and I want to go across the region, I will have to buy insurance in each of the countries or buy the COMESA insurance card. So these are, again, are things that have been raised where financial sectors, both banking and insurance, have been are concerned. Tourism, issues of single EAC tourist visa, issues of diverse licensing and regulatory frameworks for tour operators, again, is a major issue, as well as cross-border recognition of tour guides, as well as tourism professionals. Again, these are issues that have been raised. For distribution sectors, issues like the requirements for establishing businesses, particularly for supermarkets or major retail outlets. Again, these are issues that have been raised, as well as restrictions, say, on franchising or foreign ownership of distribution businesses. So these are issues that were raised by stakeholders. Construction sector, we are yet to harmonize our building codes and standards. And we also do not recognize the qualifications of engineers and contractors, and the not a lack of recognition or challenges in recognition, as well as restrictions on foreign contractors, as well as local content requirements. Granted, for construction sector, this is not one of the sectors that we had liberalized under the EAC as yet, but it is one of the sectors we are looking to liberalize. So we will be soon having discussions about this based on work that EAC has already started. In higher education, issues like cross-border student mobility, as well as non-recognition of academic credentials, is one of the challenges we find, and as well as non-harmonized qualification frameworks, as well as accreditation procedures at university and TVET levels, and also how easily students can participate in national or in available, say, scholarships or funding mechanisms across the EAC. There have been questions, say, why can't students from all EAC partner states, say, apply for loans or benefit from capitation in any of the EAC partner states, if we are really saying that we are a common market. Health and medical services, regulatory differences in terms of licensing is one of the major issues. We don't have harmonized EAC medical insurance schemes, and there is very limited portability of health insurance across the partner states, which means that, say, I am insured in South Sudan, then I can't come with that insurance and say I want to go to, say, Aga Khan Hospital in Tanzania or in Kenya again, or in Uganda. These are some of the challenges that we are experiencing. The same thing with environmental services, very little harmonization in terms of, say, requirements for renewable energy investment, barriers on cross-border energy trade and energy provisions, and we are also, there is slow adoption of environmental standards, particularly where clean energy is concerned. As we know now, climate change is a major issue across the region, across the globe. Even if we have people who think it's a hoax, it's a major issue across the globe. And the extent to which, as countries that are affected by climate change, the extent to which we are then putting measures to already start addressing some of these things in our business. I think is also an area that EABC can look at. Again, environmental services is one of the sectors that we intend to start liberalizing. And the same thing with, say, recreational and creative sector is also one of the sectors we intend to liberalize. And some of the key challenges here are things like copyrights and intellectual property enforcement. When you see now you can even tape somebody and start distributing their music, that becomes a challenge. The same thing, people photocopy, say, books that others have written, that becomes a challenge. Then we have restrictions on cross-border employment of artists and performers. And creative industry is, again, not an industry that is well incentivized. PPD, we have a fragmented private sector in services discussions at both national and regional level. We have the lack of a sustained structured mechanism, and that's why in any case we are having this meeting with coordination between private sector and public sector, and also limited resource mobilization to support regional advocacy efforts. So these again are some of the things we'll discuss in the next section. But I want to pause here so that we can hear from you based on all those issues. And perhaps I was just thinking, Geoffrey, in future and in the other ones, perhaps we shall share with them the write-up on these things early on so that they have it they can easily access it. But based on those issues, what are some of the issues you feel we have omitted? Do you feel these are issues that we should focus on? Are there others that you think should be the focus that we haven't addressed? So I pause here for input from the private sector. But before I do that, I'm just wondering, Jeff, is it possible to give us like a 5-minute break so that people can come up with those issues? And I can also drink some water.
Sure, Agatha. I think
so
unless someone has a burning question and will want to leave, otherwise I think we can have a 5-minute break.
I have to take a short break. I am sorry, it's only 5 minutes, but I really, really have to take a short break. If you get my meaning.
No worries.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. I encourage everyone, if you have a question, please put it on the chat, or you'll be writing it down when Agatha is back after 5 minutes, then we can raise a few questions. Thank you.
Jeff, I'm back. Hello, Jeff. Hello, Jeff. Hello. Hello, can people hear me? Anybody?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. I see EABC may have dropped off. I mean, not EABC. Geoffrey, are you there? I can't see you. Oh, he's there. Perhaps he also took a break.
Allow me to reach
yes.
out to him.
Yeah, maybe he took a break. I can see he's still logged on. But I welcome feedback for those who are in. There is already a question with from Eva, and I think this one is best focused or best responded to by somebody from South Sudan. They want to know how ratification is going vis-a-vis the AFCFTA agreement, and also the question I asked with regard to your schedule of commitments. Maybe we could get some feedback on the same here. And then I welcome, of course, any other questions, any other additional inputs, and feel free to type or raise your hand. Anybody?
I'm now beginning to wonder whether people are online or can anyone speak to us? Anyone on the call, just to witness that we are still together? I'm wondering whether I'm seeing names, but I'm wondering if people are actually online. Okay, I can see an emoji there. Thank you. Agatha, maybe I think there's no question.
Okay. Is Thomas still online? Caesar, you have the floor.
I see Thomas online. He's there online, but he's not speaking to us.
He was in another meeting. Caesar, you have the floor. Caesar Rico, you have the floor. EABC, can you mute him? Can you unmute him if he's muted?
Hello? Yes, this is Caesar from South Sudan National Chamber of Commerce. Actually, I am online, and then suddenly I tried to do something, and then it raised my hand. I'm so thankful, actually, the presentation is so good. And I don't know what to ask, but I just trying to understand if a country commits itself in a sector in AFT, it will not conflict actually with AFT, Africa Continental Free Trade Area, or something. Yeah, just thank you.
Okay, thank you, Caesar. Before I release you, might you want to update on how far South Sudan has gone in terms of ratification of the AFCFTA agreement and also submission of the schedule of commitments for trading services under the EAC? Do you have any updates? Hello, Caesar.
Hello?
Do you have any updates?
Myself?
Mm.
Yeah, actually little, and I know that we did not rectify for AFTA and even for the EAC, most of the sectors. But in case if we are about how that procedure will just work smoothly, it will not conflict in some cases.
Okay, maybe then I answer your question. No, making commitments at the EAC level does not conflict with our commitments at the AFCFTA level. As you know, EAC is a deeper integration, so we are a common market, while at the AFCFTA level, we are a free trade area. So the expectation is that what you commit at the EAC level will be deeper, will be a deeper level of integration than what you commit at the AFCFTA level. And what you commit at the AFCFTA level is expected to also be a deeper level of integration than what you commit at the global level under the WTO GATT, General Agreement on Trading Services. Because remember, what you open up at the WTO level, you have opened up to the world. And so in terms of international rules, for want of a better term, for our integration at the AFCFTA level or at the EAC level to be deemed as conforming to the WTO rules, we have to open substantially more sectors and do deeper integration than we have done at each successive level of integration. I don't know, Caesar, whether I have made any sense or whether I'm using too much technical language. Do you get me?
Yes, I'm getting you. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I'm comfortable with the response.
Okay, but suffice it to say, we are not contradicting ourselves, but whatever it is we commit at the AFCFTA level, ideally we should already have made that commitment at the EAC level, in other words.
Thank you.
Okay. Because also when you look at the 5 sectors that have been prioritized for the first phase at the AFCFTA level, they are already sectors that we had liberalized at the EAC level. And we are now even going further at the EAC level to liberalize the additional 5 sectors. So we are a deeper integration than at the AFCFTA. Okay, Jeff, shall I proceed because I don't see any other queries? So Eva, Caesar is not able to respond to the question on how far they've gone on ratification. Maybe if Thomas is able to, when he has a break, we welcome your input. So now the next section is about now the institutional mechanism. Hello? Hello? Was that Thomas? Okay, let me continue. So the next...
I think proceed, Agatha. You can proceed.
Okay, so the next section is about best practices in public-private dialogue mechanisms, because we have said we want to institutionalize. The question is, how best can we do that? So part of what I have, I'm proposing, or part of what I've done is looked at some of the best practices when it comes to institutionalizing dialogue. And also some of the things that we have to bear in mind is the unique, for want of a better term, nature of EABC. That number one, it's multi-sectoral. So it doesn't only deal with, say, engineering services. It deals with all services sectors, but it also deals with goods. It deals with movement of workers. It deals with the movement of people. All these are things that we expect EABC to deal with. And it is also multi-country, meaning that we expect it to represent the issues of all the EAC partner states, not only one partner state. So bearing that in mind, what are some of the things we would expect to see? Number one, of course, is that the dialogue is institutionalized. For want of a better term, that it is predictable and that there is a platform through which we engage on a regular basis with policymakers, so that we are not, currently what you find on a lot of the dialogue on services is that it is ad hoc. An issue comes up, or you are doing some trade across the region and you find a problem, you complain to EABC, EABC raises an issue on that matter. That's why you see, like when you look at some of the key issues they have dealt with are issues, say, on air transport, because these are issues that private sector feels on an everyday basis that they take a plane. So we want something that is more predictable. We want to give them a framework where we know, say, on a quarterly basis or on a biannual basis, they are engaging with policymakers. Beyond that, we want that policymakers then recognize that, yes, these are issues we are dealing with EABC. We have agreed, which goes to that point, we have agreed on issues 1, 2, 3, 4 that we are dealing with, and we can track to what extent these policy issues are being addressed. So that is number one in terms of institutionalizing that dialogue mechanism. Number two is that there has to be differentiated approaches for multi-sector engagement. Again, the issues, say, of engineering services will be very different from issues of health services, will be very different from issues, say, of distribution services. And within the engagement, EABC must be seen, or any other BMO must be seen to be engaging on different sets of issues depending on the sectors that they are representing. So that's one of them. But of course, all these sectors can come together to lobby on issues that are cross-cutting. For example, things like double taxation, those will cut across any sector and will be of interest to any sector, and making sure that you can then come together when necessary and also speak to the different sector groupings when necessary is also one of the best ways to ensure that your public-private dialogue mechanisms are working. The third thing, of course, is that if you're also engaging at sector-specific level, you want to engage with the different sector regulators, because remember, as I said, for services, regulation is the key. Here we won't have, say, tariffs, we will have regulations, and the extent to which those regulations enable, or those laws enable or make it difficult to trade in services is the concern. The next thing is the extent to which regional and national or the need to have regional and national alignment in PPD agenda. As you know, in every country, there will be how government in that country is talking to its private sector. In some countries, this is much more advanced. We've been to countries where, say, you have like a round table with the president. You have like a round table on taxation that then fits into the budget. So there are already existing mechanisms. So the key thing is to ensure that the service-related issues that we engage are the ones that are also being discussed at national level, because remember, as we said, implementation is at national level. So if a specific country has, say, policies it needs to amend or laws it needs to be put in place, there has to be that link between EABC and the national BMOs in terms of how they are pushing this agenda. And the same thing with EABC. When EABC is then engaging, say, with the council or with the EAC secretariat or with the summit, it needs to ensure that it is taking forward the priorities of the national level vis-a-vis regional integration. The fourth thing, and I don't even need to belabor this, is the issue of evidence-based advocacy. If you go to government with generalities, they will not listen to you. They will not act on your things because to them, they are not able to move with generalities. Evidence-based. We have had discussions, these discussions that we have had where government has participated. One of the key things they have hammered is the need for evidence-based advocacy. You have to come to us with evidence. What is this law that you want changed? What are the implications of changing that law? Particularly if the law has implications on revenue, what are the implications? It might have implications on employment. What are the implications? How will it be addressed in the long term? These are things that must be clear in the engagements we have with government. The other thing, of course, is the need for high-level engagement. As we know, there are some issues, and I know you have had this, that needs to be cascaded to the higher level, to the heads of summit. This can only be unlocked by the heads of summit, or this needs to be locked by the Council of Ministers, or this needs to be unlocked by, say, a certain regulator or regulators coming together. EABC has to engage at all these levels, not just with the EAC, but at the ministerial level and also at the heads of state level for it to be able to push the services agenda forward. And then the last thing, of course, is constant engagement. Your members and your service sector stakeholders must feel engaged on a regular basis. The regular is relative. It could be monthly, it could be quarterly. And again, like I said, technology has come to make it much easier for us to engage. So this is again one of the best practices in terms of PPD, because you can also, through that regular engagement, you can update your stakeholders on how far the policy issues have gone. And number two, you can also engage them on what are some of the new emerging concerns that they have, so that you regularly feed on to your policy advocacy agenda. Now, in my mind, and I believe this is also how EABC looks at it, a policy advocacy agenda is a living document, because things will arise. New things will come up based on new laws that are coming up, new issues that are coming up. So EABC has to constantly update it. And one of the way of updating it is by engaging on a regular basis with its members or with the service sector stakeholders to ensure it is it's constantly learning and constantly adding value. So based on some of these best practices, we have come up with options for an institutional mechanism. The option has three, we proposed three options on what EABC can do. Number one is EABC can improve on the EABC Trading Services Desk, or it can form sector-specific platforms, or it can form coalition of service industries. And now I will talk about each of these options in detail. So the option 1, which is an EABC trading services desk, what we would like here, or what this would expect of EABC, is to improve upon existing EABC trading services desk. And again, it doesn't even need to be called a desk. I saw in one of your inputs, it can be called a services forum. So EABC can improve on this. Number one, by giving it a mandate. And part of this mandate is even give it a TOR. And mandate can also be the regional trading services policy agenda that we are developing. That can be the first thing that it is tasked with implementing. Then give it funding, because it is one thing for there to exist a desk, but if it doesn't have funding to do the work that it wants to do, then it becomes a problem. We are happy to say EABC has mobilized some resources already to start this work, and then also give it staff. You can start with who you are. As Jeff said, they already have staff at EABC that are leading on trading services, and as you grow, you expand on that. Then you need to formally establish regional links with YALA, with EAC, with EACJ, and also with regional BMO. So it's like inform them. We have established this forum, and I like that word, forum, or this platform. And this is what it is about. This is how it is structured. This is how it is working. And this is how we hope to work with you. Then also at the national level, establish the links. Number one, of course, through your national focal point, but further through directly to the sector association, sector regulators, to tell them EABC is now, for want of a better term, upgrading the work that it does on services. And this is how it is doing it. So based on that, this is how we see that desk looking like. And we can call it a forum, as I have said. So at the EAC level, you feed directly to EAC, YALA, EACJ, but you also feed to regional BMOs like the Law Society, like the tourism platform, like FIAFA, etc. And you can, the advocacy platforms there, EABC already has established platforms. It has the SGCO roundtable, so you can leverage that. You can see how to leverage the SG forum. Now, the SG forum is a joint platform also with the civil society, but there is scope again to focus it on services, or focus some of the sessions. It can't be all of it, some of the sessions on services. Then you have the Committee on Trade and Investment at the YALA, which is tasked with, YALA is the East African Law Society, East African Legislative Assembly. It is tasked with ensuring that integration is being implemented, coming up with laws. So it is a platform that can be used. And you can even think of others. One of the proposals that came up is that there is needs maybe to have like a biannual EAC, YALA, EABC forum or PPD or conference that just discusses the services issues. So that's what happens at the regional level. At the national level, this desk or platform or forum would then link directly to the national focal point. Most of the national focal points have desks that bring together services sector, but this desk don't usually address regional issues. So you would then now give them the issues to address that are specific to the said country, and then also either directly or through the national focal point, you then also reach the sector BMOs, you reach the sector players, and you also reach regulators in different sectors. So this is how we see this option working. What are some of the pros and cons? The major advantage is that it is an easy thing to set up. It is already existing, so we are just improving on it. They already have staff. You already have an existing structure at national level, and then you would use the resources you have mobilized through GIZ to help you build it up. The major disadvantage here is that unless it is structured properly, then it gets lost in the broader advocacy issues that EABC is carrying. That's why we are saying be intentional about it, give it a mandate, communicate about it, give it, even rebrand it by giving it a name like a forum or a platform, and then informing people about it. Option 2 would be that EABC sets up specialized sector-specific platform. So you can have a platform, say, on financial services, a platform on logistics, a platform on tourism, etc. But if you look at this really and you look at how broad the services sector is, we are saying EABC can set up as many as 12 different committees. And then what it would do is co-opt where platforms already exist, like the tourism platform, like the East Africa Bankers Association, you co-opt them. And then these platforms become the point at which EABC then carries out its dialogue. And if you look at it, this is how it would look like. So you have EABC at the top, and you have still the same platforms of YALA, EAC, YALA, EACJ. But then below it, you have the professional services platforms, or the transport and logistics platform, the education platform, the financial sector platform, you name it. So ideally, EABC would form as many platforms as there is interested private sector. And then through those platforms, they would then go to the sector BMOs and the sector players and the sector regulators. But then each platform is operating on its own. What are some of the cons and the pros? The pro is that through a structure like that one makes it very easy to build common positions at the sector level. And also EABC has had an experience building one, and perhaps it can learn from why it failed, although the failure was more an issue of funding. Now, the disadvantage is that this would be transactionally very heavy, and EABC doesn't have the funding or the muscle, the human resource necessary to run all these platforms. And because you would then have to have a lead for each platform. If you have a platform on financial services, you need a financial person there. You have a platform on logistics services, you need somebody there. And then, of course, for national level BMOs, again, they may see this as an added responsibility. And then how to coordinate all these different platforms and how to engage with policymakers from all these different platforms becomes a key challenge. So these are some of the disadvantages I see with that. Now, the option 3 is to set up what we call a coalition of service sector industries or services industries, or a CSI. Now, a CSI is what you find in many developed countries. But a CSI usually is formed as a separate body. It wouldn't be formed, say, as something within EABC. Usually they are a separate body with their own governance structure, with their own board members, their own members or membership. And if we were to form a CSI, this then becomes the umbrella body that is representing the service sector. And then, of course, there is the question on how would this body be owned by EABC? How would it work with EABC? Is it working independently or together? So these are things that EABC would have to first of all think through before they decide that they would like to form a CSI. Now, one of the key things I have heard is that there may be interest at the AFCFTA level to form a CSI, and if there was one in the EABC or EAC, they would then use that as a model. So perhaps that is one of the cons or the pros. In terms of implementation approach, what this would require, it would require a stakeholder mapping, and it would require all private sector to come on board, or at least a good portion of them to come on board and agree we are forming a CSI. But number 2, this would be a completely different legal and institutional framework. So it would have to have its defined governance structures, defined membership, funding, etc. And it would also have to have its own secretariat and have technical expertise, etc. And the last thing, it would then have to agree on how it is working with EABC, how it is working with EAC, as well as other RECs, regional blocks. Now, the one major pro is that it is a tested and tried methodology globally. However, The disadvantage is that this is something that requires financial and technical support to become fully operational. And also EABC once tried to establish one, but it died because the organization that was funding it, which was called ILIEP, closed down, so they didn't have funding. And number two, it needs very strong leadership and commitment from private sector. And number three, there will be a risk of fragmentation if national associations are not fully aligned with what we want to do from a coalition perspective. So based on those three options, we have come up with a proposal on the way forward, but of course we welcome your feedback on this proposal. We are proposing that EABC goes with a hybrid approach. So instead of just saying the desk or platform or whatever we say, we start with EABC having the well-structured and funded trading services desk or platform or forum, whatever EABC will call it. I think this is something that can be discussed during or can be finalized during the regional meeting, but with the aim of eventually growing into a CSI once, this CSI would be once EABC has, first of all, decided what it is relationship with the CSI, what is the governance structure, what is the funding structure, so that it is not eaten up, that this CSI is not competing with members with EABC. This CSI is not competing with funding with EABC. So our proposal is that EABC strengthens what it already has. So now this desk or platform would address regional issues. So it would have to reach out to regional, would address sectoral issues. So it would have to now formally make those approaches to the sector groupings. Already we have the regional policy agenda that will tell you what are the issues from the sectors, but you then build on these issues through that regular dialogue. But it would also mean that we do not look at sector-specific platforms as an option, because, as I said, this would be very expensive. But for sectors that have already have regional collaboration, say the FIAFAS, the East Africa Tourism Platform, the East Africa Bankers Association, you can look at how do we then work with these bodies. And one of the ways that was discussed in one of the meetings is that these bodies can have a representative at the EABC. So for example, say there is a meeting that EABC needs to engage in, say for monetary affairs, the MAC committee, which is purely financial. Then you can have, say, a representative of the East African Bankers Association going to that meeting on your behalf and contributing on behalf of the financial sector, which has a higher stake in that meeting. So these are some of the proposals that have come forward. And I submit, okay, sorry, before I submit for your input, so bear this slide in mind. I have one final slide that in terms of whatever structure we adopt, there are some key factors to consider, key levels of success. The number one is that there has to be political support. So the extent to which EABC is able to engage with, already at the EAC, EALA and EACJ, you have that engagement very well established. But at sector levels with regulators, this is one of the things you need to do. Then you have to have private sector buy-in. There has to be institutional alignment so that EAC is not working on some things that you are not working on, and you are working on some things that are not priority for EAC. So already, as you know, EAC has the strategy for trading services. So EABC has to ensure it is feeding into the implementation of this strategy. And also in the platforms that you have to engage with EABC, please mute whomever is talking. In the platforms you are able to engage with EABC, with EAC, then you have to ensure that private sector agenda is also communicated to EAC. EABC, please mute someone. Thank you. The other
please
thing,
mute the participants. Yes.
okay. The other thing, of course, is sustainable financing. I think we have had several times very good initiatives come up, but they always fail when there is no sustainable financing. And that is why, again, the option of already building on what is existing, because it is existing and will require less money, is already good, so that then EABC can enhance, can use those platforms to bring in more members in services, to bring in more funding in services, and even to generate any other sponsorships. Then, of course, your evidence-based research, I don't need to talk about it, and I also don't need to talk about the continuous engagement because I have also talked about it sufficiently. With that, Jeff, I want to submit and then, of course, take us back to hear input from the stakeholders on these proposals. I submit.
Thank you, Agatha. Can I see some thumbs up emojis for Agatha, please? For ably taking us through this presentation and most importantly, the last 3-4 slides. Thank you on the proposals and what you think about them. So any question, any addition, any thoughts? Remember, this is how we want to organize ourselves to represent you ably. How you feel as it should be done would be great to hear from you. Thank you. Dixon, please go ahead.
Hello, I think Dixon has his hand up. Dixon, please weigh in. And then also Caesar, I don't know whether that is an old hand or a new one. Also feel free to weigh in. Dixon, you have the floor.
Is it a new hand or?
Okay, Felix, you have the floor.
Thank you for the second time. Just asking whether, for the first question that you raised regarding the commitments for South Sudan, is there anyone who have answered this question?
No.
Now, can you still repeat, because we would like to know what's the process?
So I was asking you, as you recall, Felix, last year we had quite a lot of support from EAC to come up with a draft schedule of commitments for South Sudan. But we have not, I don't know whether that has been submitted officially to the EAC. So we wanted to get an update on that. And number two, we also wanted to get an update on South Sudan's ratification of the AFCFTA agreement. So if you could do us on that, we would appreciate. And then also to respond to Dixon. Dixon, we are not hearing you. So if you are speaking, maybe your mic was off. We could not hear you. So after Felix, we will give you the floor again. Felix, you have the floor.
In fact, we are supposed to have a member from the Chamber of Commerce. Mostly, I think it should be our delegated member to the EAC or Minister of East African Community Affairs in South Sudan to give us update, because they are the focal point for these purposes. I don't know whether they're around or I don't see any of them. Please, could you try to ask them if at all they are around, because as I can see, I didn't see any one of them.
Okay, Thomas, when he introduced himself, he said he's from the ministry and said he would weigh in, but he was also in another meeting, so I don't know whether he's following. And Caesar from the chamber did not have updates.
So does it mean that this question is still hanging? We didn't have the answer.
Yes, it's still hanging, although okay. I see Thomas might comment. Thomas, we give you the floor. Hello, Thomas.
Yes. Can you?
Caesar, can we request you to please mute? Caesar Rico, can we request you to mute? Okay, Thomas, you have the floor.
Yes, can I get just let me get the question clearly? Can you repeat it?
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm happy to. There was a question first of all on whether the Republic of South Sudan has already now ratified its AFCFTA agreement, and we were not sure. And number two, we had asked regarding the schedule of commitments that the Republic of South Sudan developed last year, whether this has now been shared with the EAC, whether it's an official document, whether we can share it with stakeholders. So we were not sure where we are at, so we didn't share it. So if you are able to share with us any updates, we would appreciate.
Okay, thank you. I think maybe just to go direct to the question, we have not yet ratified the African Continental Free Trade Area, although we are actually enjoying the being a member and being an observer. And the schedule. The second question on the schedule is still we have not submitted. Still, we're yet to finalize the schedule before it's submitted officially.
Okay. Is there any advocacy point on that one on submission of the schedule? Do you think there is anything ABC should do?
I think we're working on that together with Chamber of Commerce and our private sector. So I think this could be actually also an opportunity. I think we need to work together and with our Chamber of Commerce and EABC so that we see how we can fast track the process.
Okay.
Basically, also delays as I think my colleagues from South Sudan can agree with me. We had experienced for quite a number of time a high turnover of leadership in the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So this also impacted on the smooth progress of following up on some of these agreements. So I think it's good now we have leadership in place, and we'll try to check and ensure that we fast track their support.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Peter Akol from Miaka also has his hand up. Peter, do you want to weigh in? I give you the floor. Yeah, thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Agatha. Concerning your question, concerning
Yes.
the last part of your question for South Sudan submission, their commitment to the EAC is still yet, because tomorrow we are going to have a meeting with the Minister of Trade, and then from there we will try to submit our commitment before we are doing our national consultation, which is going to take place this month.
Okay.
So the schedule of commitment will be submitted before the team of the EAC Secretariat coming to South Sudan.
Perfect. That is good news.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you,
Thank you.
Akol.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, can I just comment on something?
Yes, of course.
Yes, I've been following up the discussion and the presentation, and I'm more interested on the data that is presented. We also know that
Hello, Thomas, we have lost you. Hello, Thomas. EABC, can you hear him?
No, actually, his voice has fainted away, so can't hear him.
Thomas, if you can.
Thomas?
Yeah. Thomas, if you can hear us, we can't hear you. Thomas, we lost you.
yes, I think this it was network. I'm back now.
Okay.
You hear me?
We can hear you, and in fact, we lost you when your question started, so you may ask it again. It was on data.
Yes, it's not a question, but it's just a comment. The data that are present, because I tried to get the verification aspect of these data, but in most cases it doesn't feature at our own our own files. So I think the aggregate generally from all the institutions that the services cluster is concerned. We do get this information mostly from our from EAC, generally from our partner states that we trade. But I think there's a need that we need the EABC to help us to push in ensuring that South Sudan, our national institutions first, track this data, particularly on trade in service. We have a lot of information that need to be aggregated so that we verify the data that we get from our partner states, because all the data we are getting is either gotten from Nimule, from the border point, or Kenyan border point, or other border points within the country. But the aggregation within, we don't have. Even in the Bureau of Statistics, we don't have this information that are tracked, that these are the updated. It's just the same concern that we are seeing in the presentation. You are presenting to us data of 2012, 22, 23. But what have we been doing 23, 24, 24? Now we are going to 25. And you see, even this is something that we really want to see, that if we can be supported, we work together with EABC, and EABC need to really maybe this time work closely with our National Chamber of Commerce to try to help the institutions, because partly it's a shared responsibility. All of us have this responsibility to ensure that our country, our government, our private sector work together. So I'm happy we have now actually leadership of EABC, and through my colleague, the chair, we will be able to fast track things.
Yes. Thank you very much, Thomas. In fact, I don't know whether I'm still sharing. It was one of the issues we actually raised in terms of the roles that EABC can carry, or some of the things that EABC can lead on here in terms of weak data and evidence base. It's not just within RSS, the Republic of South Sudan. It is across the region. And I fully agree with you. The private sector is particularly critical in collecting this data on trading services. So it is one of the issues we are hoping EABC can take forward and work with DAC and also with the national private sector and the National Bureaus of Statistics to improve the data we have on trading services. So yes, fully acknowledged, and it will be included in the priorities for EABC. Asante sana.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Dixon, I want to give you the floor. I don't know whether you are able to talk. Cesar Rico, I don't know whether yours is an old hand or you have put up a new hand. If you want the floor, we will also give you. Dixon, you have the floor. Dixon, you have the floor. Okay, as we wait for Dixon to come on board, Eric from DRC, I see you are, I don't speak French, but I understand it. You are asking whether there is interpretation for this meeting, because it was specific meeting for the Republic of South Sudan. We don't have interpretation. But we shall have interpretation for the meeting for DRC. Jeffrey, make sure I'm not giving the wrong information. We are hoping to have interpretation for the meeting for DRC in acknowledgement of you being predominantly French speaking. So for this meeting for the Republic of South Sudan, no, we don't have a translation, but we will have for the DRC meeting. I submit. Eric, not Eric, sorry. Dixon, your hand is up. We give you the floor.
I think it was an old hand.
No, he's even put a comment he was speaking, but we couldn't hear him. And even now, if you're speaking, Dixon, we can't hear you. I think there is a problem with your mic. If you are speaking, we can't hear you. Do you want to type your question? Because we still can't hear you.
He's facing a challenge. I am not certain what's going on.
Yeah.
Seems really. Oh. If you could just text your question. I think he's unable to speak, Agatha. We can proceed. I think, had you concluded?
I have concluded.
Hello, I just want to inquire something about the technicalities here. Is my hand there appear raised? Is it raised up? This is Caesar, yeah.
At the moment, no, but it was up before.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. Actually, thank you.
No worries. Dixon, you have not, we still can't hear you. So I propose you type. If you can't type, because there seems to be a problem, we can't hear you. Christine, I saw your hand come up and then go, or it's still up? Christine? Christine Umurungi, you have the floor. Your hand came up and then disappeared. Okay. If there are no other, there is no further feedback, I was going now to submit and say that is the end of my presentation and give us back to EABC, who are going to guide us on, give us just a quick update on what is happening, including maybe Geoffrey just update them on the regional meeting where we hope for their participation. I submit with a very big thank you to all of you for listening to me, for your very good feedback and your participation. Asanteni sana.
Thank you so much, Agatha, always for making this happen and really breaking down to the best of the knowledge for everyone to understand this topic. It's a very technical topic, I must say, but yours really nailed it, and thank you so much. As we mentioned to you at the beginning, we are doing consultations, national consultation, to ensure that we have a regional perspective on how the private sector wants to be the advocacy to take place, especially in trade and services. As she said, as Agatha said, we're remaining with 2 partner states, DRC and Republic of Somalia, to hear what they think. So thank you so much. After this, we have a regional workshop, which is taking place on the 17th and 18th of this month. Of course, some of you will be consulted to be part of it. Of course, due to resources, we can't bring everyone in the sector, but we'll definitely try our best to ensure that we bring the major representatives in the sector, be as inclusive as we can be. And from there, that's when we shall have a validated institutional mechanism of how we want advocacy and trade services to happen at the regional level. So thank you very much on behalf of our CEO, Mr. Adrian Jau. Let me thank you so much for giving us your time, and I wish you the best the whole of the week, and enjoy your lunch. Thank you so much. We'll definitely communicate and share with you the presentations that were shared today. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, excellent. We'll mention you can attend physically. We'll mention to you the venue. It's still under procurement. When the venue is communicated, we shall definitely engage you on how you can attend. If it is in Kampala, you attend. It's actually in Kampala, so you will definitely attend. You are free to attend physically and air out your issues as well, contribute as well. So we'll communicate the venue when it is the procurement is complete. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Feel free to break off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and bye. Have a good lunch.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Dixon, we still can't hear you if you're talking. Thank you.
Are we meeting after lunch or it is end of the sessions?
It's end of the session.
Okay, that is great. I'm so grateful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caesar.